after 10, Congo Chris Philp, clawing his way, elbowing his way into the news. Always good to see. Always a lovely way to start the week. We'll have a look at some of his other pronouncements later in the programme. Don't ask me why anybody's paying any attention to an unelected bureaucrat like Zia Yusuf. I thought that lot hated unelected bureaucrats. Isn't that what they existed to get rid of? Get rid of all the unelected bureaucrats. We only want elected politicians. But I will explain to you a little later in the programme why... So one European journalist described the far right as being almost beside themselves with glee at the scenes of human beings swimming to the exclave of Ceuta, technically Spanish territory, but not, as I don't think anyone else is going to bother to tell you this week, not in Schengen, therefore not actually a problem for the European Union. In fact, the massive majority of those human beings have gone home already, have already been sent to Morocco, except for the 72 that died, who, again, didn't seem to get any mention whatsoever from the people trying to use yet another human tragedy for their own personal and political gain. More on that a little later. We'll begin with education. There are two stories in the news today that may have caught your eye. One is about parents fighting back against excessive authoritarianism. It almost speaks to the same questions as the one that I think we'll concentrate on first, which sees the new Secretary of State for Education, Lucy Powell, describing a straitjacket, a schooling straitjacket. And I appreciate not everybody finds this stuff as interesting as I do. I think the reason why I find it so interesting is because I am so acutely and permanently conscious of the difference that education doesn't just make to lives, but made to my life. I'm not going to labour the point. If you've listened even in passing to this programme in the past, you'll be aware of my own educational background and also perhaps of the knowledge I have, or not the knowledge, but the consciousness I have of where my life might have gone had I not had the sort of education that I had. I mean, even at a posh public school, I had a housemaster who said once that I will be either in prison or a millionaire by the time I'm 21. He was wrong on both counts, but, that was pretty par for the course with him. But had I not gone to a school that kept a very close eye on you, then I don't know. There's some of my less attractive traits might have gone... might have taken me into some very unpleasant places. So I'm aware of that. I'm also aware of strictness being largely a negative thing. Again, drawing on my own education, I only relatively recently did I realise, in fact, you might have been listening to me when I did realise, that at the school I attended where corporal punishment was still a thing, the same boys got beaten all the time. I mean, literally the same boys. So in a cohort of, let's say, 20 boys, there'd be 2 boys who were beaten regularly, and the other 18 weren't. Now, I don't know whether you hold up those 2 boys as the reason why the other 18 never got beaten, but excessive strictness seems to me to be unnecessary for the massive majority of children and irrelevant for the ones that it's usually directed at. Most naughty kids, for want of a better word, are not naughty. We understand a lot better now, of course. Neurodiversity and that sense of shame that descends upon you the moment you've done something wrong. There's a brilliant... I saw Belle and Sebastian in Margate on Friday night. I've had such a joyous year for gigs, I've seen 3 of the best gigs of my life this year. Mike Skinner at the Alexander Palace, James at the O2, and thank you for all the lovely words about the interview with Tim Booth, the lead singer of James, that is this week's episode of Full Disclosure. And then Belle and Sebastian at Dreamland in Margate last night. And there's a Belle and Sebastian song, isn't there, about a boy who's always getting into trouble, hang his head in shame again. Quite sort of religious undertones, as is often the case with Stuart Murdoch's work. But it's not the strictness. There's a story that the BBC carried today about a young girl who stopped drinking water because that was the only way she could guarantee that she wouldn't need to go to the toilet. And as a consequence of not drinking enough water, she found herself getting all sorts of infections. So the straitjacket, the schooling straitjacket that Lucy Powell talks about, being forced to prioritise only academic subjects such as English, science and history, which has led to children feeling like failures again, in her words, and again. She's taking a fresh look at what we are teaching our children and whether we are equipping them for their lives ahead. I mean, I still think Latin is worth studying, on one level, and on another level, I think she's absolutely right. We do seem to be teaching things that have very little or no modern applications. I remember a maths teacher, I must have told you this before, explaining to me that it wasn't pointless to learn Pythagoras' theorem because one day you might have to paint the lines on the side of a rugby pitch, which is something he used to do. And he told us, Pythagoras' theorem to make sure that the right angles on all four corners were absolutely plumb, were absolutely perfect. I don't even know how you do that. I can vaguely remember what Pythagoras' theorem is, but I don't know that I'd be able to deploy it in the painting of white lines on the side of a rugby pitch. 9 minutes after 10 is the time. So we all, when we talk about education, we all think first of our own education. At least I presume we do. And then you think perhaps about your children's, but your relationship with your children's education is nowhere near as intimate as your relationship with your own education. And then you perhaps start thinking in more abstract terms about what should and shouldn't be done. And what we have to get rid of, and indeed what I have got rid of, is the sense that what is best for you is best for everybody. So if, like Michael Gove and me, you benefit enormously from being tested, it kind of gives you a little free pass, a hack, if you like, on not actually working that hard the rest of the time. You can swat up for a test, you can smash it, you can get a gold star, and then you can go back to messing around for the rest of the term. Or you spend the term messing around, and then you get yourself into gear for the last couple of weeks or the last couple of days. You swat up for your exams and your tests, you do okay, and you camouflage the fact that you have been on autopilot for much of the year. Lucy Powell, understandably, like almost every teacher I've spoken to in recent years, blames Michael Gove for this, but Michael Gove would respond by pointing out that in international league tables in maths among 15-year-olds, we went up from 27th in 2009 to 11th in 2023, and there was a smaller but still real rise in our performance in science. Supporters of Michael Gove would point out that Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales have not experienced improvements that are comparable with, indeed, or similar to England's. But and then most newspapers or media organisations will wheel out some weirdo who claims to be the strictest teacher in the world, or the strictest headmaster in Christendom, or the strictest head teacher in Hogwarts, and they'll be talking about how important it is to treat children as sort of crops, to be harvested, and not as human beings, to be nurtured and cherished and looked after. So, is Lucy Powell right? Let's begin with that first question. Is it a mistake to push children into academic subjects? Because the problem here is that you will think about you or your children. You'll just go, well, yeah, it wasn't a mistake for me, therefore the system is correct. 0345 6060 973. Or you'll think, I never should have done academic subjects. I should have been able to explore other sides of myself earlier in school. Therefore, yes, Lucy Powell is correct. 0345 6060 973. So I'm going to go with a slightly more philosophical question, actually. And again, to reference my own education, I ended up studying philosophy at university, which is simultaneously useless and the most important subject any human being can ever study at the same time. If you don't test children a lot, how do you know how well they're doing? 0345 6060 973. I'll be launching the Burnham Optimism Barometer just before we go to the first break of the day. You'll have the duration of that break to submit your score, and we'll tot it up and reveal the answers, frankly, just when we get round to it. And here's the second question. If you think the first one was too philosophical, then wait till you try the second one for size. And I really want you to answer this, actually. I want you to ring in and answer this. I don't care how hot it is out there. I can't do this on my own all week. What's the point of school? What's it for? 0345 6060 973. And if that sounds like a stupid question, let me remind you why it's not. Politicians, and indeed educational experts, are constantly arguing about what schools should be doing. which suggests to me that they don't agree about what school is for. Or if they do agree about what school is for, they disagree about how best to deliver the things that school is designed to deliver. But we haven't actually taken things back to first principles before. Or if we have, I can't remember. What is school actually for? 0345 6060 973. And if we begin with that question, then we can look at what is the best way to deliver those things. What is the best way to deliver those things? Look, just in case the brilliant guys and gals, the men and women on social media at LBC, just in case they clip this up and I'm sitting here going, what's the point of school? This is not, however viral it might go, this is not me saying, let's abolish schools, lads, and just like all go out picking strawberries instead. It is the opposite of that in a way. It is a reminder of the importance of establishing what we are doing, why we are doing it. So just your thought, your first thought. What is school for? And is it meeting those needs at the moment? I don't know the answer to that question, which always fills me with a sort of curious combination of trepidatiousness, because you might not know either, in which case we haven't got a phone in, and excitement, because you're going to tell me things, you're going to say things to me that I haven't thought of before. You can go negative on it if you want. It's sustaining the capitalist con, but what is it designed to do? What is school for? 0345 6060 973. And then the second question, looking at this issue of a straitjacket, and although she's talking more about pushing people into academic subjects than actual testing, the whole point about academic subjects is that they are testable, which is why some teachers prefer them. Measurable metrics, you can get a grade, you can get a mark out of 10 or a mark out of 100. And I don't think you need to be a teaching professional to answer this question, but here it is. If you don't test children a lot, how do you know how well they're doing? And in a way, those questions could turn out to be two sides of the same coin, couldn't they? So Gove, lots and lots of testing. Anti-Gove, less testing. That's simplistic, but I think accurate and effective. What is school for? 0345 6060 973. And if you don't test children a lot, how do you know how well they're doing? How do you know how successfully they are getting the stuff that school is designed to deliver? All right? Hit the numbers now. You will get through. But before that, the Bob is upon us. And that's 2 Mondays. That's the first Monday I had to remember. Thank you for all the reminders. Eleanor also remembered. I'd completely forgotten. Every Monday at 10:15, I ask you to submit a mark out of 10 for how optimistic you currently feel about Andy Burnham's premiership. I've forgotten what last week's number was, but the producer is about to remind me. 8. Last week, the Andy Burnham Optimism Barometer stood at 8 out of 10, which was a very carefully calculated figure, which has something to do with either modes, medians or means, averages, which, to be fair, is in pretty much the same part of my brain as Pythagoras' theorem. But there it is. Last week it stood at 8. Where does it stand today? Your Burnham Optimism Barometer score, submit it to 84850, or indeed WhatsApp it to 0345 6060 973 right now, and we will top them up hopefully before 11 o'clock, if not shortly afterwards. But key questions, twofold. What's school for? Reminders. Remind each other, remind ourselves, what is school for? What are we supposed to be doing for and to these children? And if you don't test them a lot, how do you know whether it's working? It's 10:70.
James O'Brien on LBC.
And the Bob is now closed. The Burnham Optimism Barometer is now closed. Apologies if you couldn't get your act together, or if you thought you had longer. We will no longer be taking any submissions for the Burnham Optimism Barometer. The scores are in, and the numbers are about to be crunched. 19 minutes after 10 is the time. So the schooling straitjacket is what the new Education Secretary, Lucy Powell, is targeting. And we're looking at what school is supposed to be doing, because sometimes I think we forget to ask the simplest questions, and we're wondering how you measure schools, how you judge success, how you assess pupils without having lots of tests, which seems to be anathema, and I don't think we should have lots of tests. even though it was a method of education that suited me down to the ground, and yet I don't have an answer to the question of what you do instead. Maybe it's the wrong question. Louisa is in Shepherd's Bush. Louisa, what would you like to say?
I would like to say that I think that we cannot say that one size fits all in education.
No.
I think that some kids really need the pressure and they love exams, and that's the way that their brain works. There are other kids who've got a different kind of, they present with different needs and they need school to be a safe container. And I think that we dumb down the politicians just see, well, what do the majority need? And that in turn, it doesn't serve the purpose. So I think there should be many different types of schools. There should be one which is more for the neurodiverse or the trauma children or people who have, just basically there should be a lot of variety.
You, Louisa, haven't read Lucy Powell's article this morning, have you?
I haven't indeed. I try not to read.
No, wait, let me read you the first line of paragraph 5. Ready?
Yes.
The one-size-fits-all approach simply doesn't suit all children. For some, it's become a straitjacket that has left too many being branded a failure again and again instead of being able to realise their potential. There you go.
Okay, well, I do agree with her.
Word for word, Louisa. Word for word.
I was just excited because I normally am working and I've given myself the morning off, and I was listening to your show and I've pulled over in my car because I don't want Plod to arrest me. And I just thought, you know what, if I get through to your show,
well, here you are.
What I like about you is that you have the ability to debate, and you will say, this is my experience, but I'm not going to let it colour Tom, Dick and Harry's.
I used to, and you're absolutely right. Michael Gove and me benefit enormously from the one-size-fits-all approach, but guess what? The people it doesn't fit don't benefit. Do you want to have a little crack at the question of what school is for?
Yes, I will. So I'm just going to give you some context.
Yes,
so I have been as a school psychotherapist. I worked in private, I worked in state, I've worked in really rundown areas, I've worked with all age groups. I've also worked in Holloway, women's prisons,
wow.
I've worked in male prisons. So I see what happens when, children's basic needs don't get met, and nobody looks at the broad picture, and it's very easy to come up with some Mickey Mouse solution. And and it's like, I don't think so, I won't get into prisons. However, what is school for? School, developmentally, the brain from 7 years on, and I do believe 7, I think, the first 7 years should be about being secure and safe and being nurtured and being allowed to play. And then in those first 7 years, if you're a brilliant footballer, it's going to be seen. If you're a great dancer. But anyway, you then go and you learn how to socialise, and you form and learn how to separate from your family. Really important. You learn how that you might, don't know how to be good with other kids, and you take things personally, and you learn to be a little bit more robust. But then the schools cannot just put Tom and Harry in the same thing, because Tom might be, I just think we've got to see people as individual needs and try and have enough variance to support.
And that will cost an awful lot of money and involve sort of root and branch reformation of a profession that presumably feels that it gets tinkered with every time there's a new government, every time there's a new education secretary. But your central point, I think, is inarguable, Louisa. Thank you so much. And if we wanted to try to pin down an answer to the question that accommodates Louisa's analysis of lots of different children need lots of different things, what would the commonality be? Lucy Powell, to give her due, has a crack at that in her article for The Times this morning. She uses the word passport. This means giving more children a passport to success wherever their passions lie, creating high vocational options as well as the academic ones. But I like this phrase. What is school for? Education, she writes, should be a passport into work, into life, onto the next stage. As things stand, too many aren't given one. And she suggests that many of the 1 million young people not currently in education, employment or training And remember, they are all graduates of the education system that Michael Gove and Dominic Cummings created, with a side order, a rather large side order, I happen to believe, of COVID-related lockdowns. But there are 1 million of them. They graduated from Michael Gove's education system. They're currently not in education, employment or training. So they clearly weren't given a passport. But what is in that passport? What does that even mean? What are the stamps? What's on the pages? And 25 minutes after 10 is the time. Tell me what it's like to leave school without a passport. Why do you think when you left school, looking back now and using Lucy Powell's imagery, you didn't have a passport? You hadn't been equipped with whatever it is that you would have needed to move on to the next stage of life, into work, into life, into society. What was it like? Why do you think you didn't have a passport, and what's it like not to have one? Because those are the people that I think this conversation is aimed at. Ben's in Reading. Ben, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. Yes, so to give a bit of context, I'm a teacher myself in a secondary school, but I'm also, I finished school in 2006. I'm dyslexic, I'm autistic, so I completely understand the principles behind all of it. When I was at school, yes, dyslexia was something that was approached, but I still had to meet the same standards. I still had to do an exam without necessarily having a lot of support from the school. And I managed to get through. I managed to go through and do a degree, and then I managed to get on with my life from that as well. I'm not going to say it wasn't tough, but certainly one thing I would say as an observation of school in 2026 to school in 2006 is there is a lot more done for the child by school staff, and a lot more of, I'm trying to think of the words to phrase this right, but okay, without almost letting the child off of their actions a lot more. And there is a lot of school staff who feel that they are doing more they are putting in more work than the child is putting into their own education system.
I'm interested in this. It's not really the phone-in that we're having today. You're about to use the word resilience, I think, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
So we've done that phone-in many times. I'm interested in what you think school is for.
So, I mean, in part, the word that I was going to say is allowing the child to make the mistakes in school and learn how to work and fit in with the real world. That is one of the key things. I think the fundamental thing is there is an educational element to within that, allowing children to experiment and try out different life pathways that they can take.
What? Give me some examples or some sort of ideas of what you mean.
So, key one. So, my father was a solicitor. My mother did a philosophy and ethics degree at Cambridge. So, both highly academic, but I went down a photography and art route at school by trying out different things, by finding what I enjoyed, and then taking that further from that further. So, actually, it doesn't mean that what your family has done before is what the way your pathway has already been set out in front of you. It allows you to try out different areas, experiment with those areas, and see, actually, is that the pathway I want to take?
And that involves, and perhaps this is something you would have felt quite keenly with an academic background and dyslexia, which would be part of the reason why I think you felt more comfortable in visual media and in photography and art. Yeah. It would involve removing some of the value from academic subjects. You know, Lucy Powell is describing the prioritization of English, maths and science, but for many bright children, well, bright's a terrible word, but for many young people, for many children who don't have a natural facility with those disciplines, we don't put any effort into finding the things that they might have a natural facility for, or we don't put enough effort into it, and someone did put the effort into helping you find the things you had a natural affinity for.
And I think.
We're going to lose the phone line. Go on.
I think. Hello.
In a sense, as quickly because your phone line's going south.
Yeah. So I think also it's about saying that art subjects don't just. Hello.
No, I did warn you, but I think you got your point across. It's nobody's fault, that, by the way. If the phones go south on LBC, it's not the producer's fault. It's not the caller's fault. I tell it like it's probably the presenter's fault. I get the blame for everything around here. Seriously, if you get the breakfast order wrong for the production team, it's my fault somehow. Honestly, the crosses I bear quietly and silently on your behalf. I know what you're thinking. Where's all the quietness and silence, James? These are not things I associate with you. It's 10:30. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Dominic Ellis is here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10:33 is the time. I mean, rather than a catch-all umbrella term to describe what school is for, I think a lot of us are just sort of throwing tickets into the pot that contain things we think are important. I don't think anything is more important, really, as you get older than understanding the importance of critical thinking, being taught how to work out which sources are reliable and which sources are not, how to actually process information in a way that takes you towards knowledge and truth rather than disinformation and misinformation. And this story about Ceuta that you just heard reference to there in our news bulletin is an absolutely classic example. Probably the best quote you'll read on this is from an Italian journalist who has described the global right, Andrea Rizzi. I think a Spanish journalist. The global right wing are, in Andrea's words, hyperventilating with happiness at these scenes. And of course, Russia has been gloating too. Russia's absolutely delighted by these scenes. Donald Trump, of course, is very cross with Spain because they opposed his war on Iran. He's used words like catastrophe and invasion. Giorgia Meloni in Italy has an election looming. She will well know that almost all of the people that crossed that body of water from Morocco into the Spanish exclave of Ceuta have already been returned. They've already been sent back. Did you know that? Because I'll tell you what, that unelected bureaucrat Zia Youssef will be pretending or guaranteeing or banking on the fact that you don't know that, and that he doesn't want you to know that, and he certainly won't be telling you that. I don't know whether Farage himself is going to be speaking later today, but given that I think journalists are present and will want to ask him questions about his increasingly murky finances, I think it's unlikely that it will be open season on asking the great defenders of freedom of speech anything that you would like to ask them, but they won't be telling you this. And thank goodness for decent journalists like Sarah Rainsford at the BBC, who's dug in properly to all of these facts and found out what is actually going on. So the first thing you need to know, in my view, and I'm going to say as a Christian, but of course every other religion that preaches compassion and kindness would also focus upon this figure. The first thing you need to know is that 72 people are dead, at least. Their bodies pulled from the sea where they floated alongside rubber rings and flippers. 72 people dead, and yet, as Andrea Rizzi correctly says, the global right, or the far right if you prefer, are hyperventilating with happiness. 72 people dead, and you don't need me to tell you which politicians in this country are rubbing their thighs with glee and preparing to pretend that this is indicative of some broader, larger truth. We also know, thanks to this journalist's work, that the thing about Meloni that you most need to know is that she announced that they were suspending Italy's Schengen treatment with Spain, despite the fact that, of course, Ceuta is not in the Schengen zone, and there is no way for people who have made that journey to get into mainland Europe unchecked. She knows that, but she's got elections later this year, and so she needs to she needs to abandon the truth and essentially endorse or indulge the propaganda. If you're interested in how it happened, Spain announced, there's two things that have happened in Spain in recent months. One is a controversial move to allow hundreds of thousands of undocumented migrants to apply for residence and work permits to regularise their status. It's an idea that Boris Johnson also endorsed when he was originally running for Mayor of London. It's why some of us voted for him, because it takes people out of the so-called black economy and puts them on the payroll and ensures that not only do they enjoy protections in the workplace, but also that they can be properly and legally taxed. He also, or rather the Supreme Court in Spain, also made a ruling about making it much harder to push back people who have reached Spain by sea. Of course, Ceuta doesn't fall under that category. And what they've discovered is that online, loads and loads and loads of accounts were punting the idea that if you could just get to Ceuta, you would not only achieve legal migration status, but it would also be almost impossible for them to send you back. Reporters have heard people shouting, "Spain is open." as they jumped into the sea. Multiple accounts that the BBC has checked itself show young people in wetsuits and flippers or filming themselves already swimming. But these accounts have only been active for weeks. All of their promises were false. If you made it to Ceuta, you were met with nothing. You got no food, you got no shelter, and you had absolutely no route into continental Europe, which is why most of them quickly turned back of their own accord, and thousands of others will be helped to get back. And there it is. Why has migration in this way been weaponised? It happened in Belarus a few years ago, you'll remember, almost certainly with Russian roots. Why would the global right be hyperventilating with happiness over a story that is over and done with before the ink is even dry upon your daily newspapers? And why will far-right politicians today be attempting to pretend that this story is something that it isn't? I'll leave you to answer those questions, but it occurred to me this is one of the things we go to school for, so that we have the ability to work out what's true and what isn't. And arguably, it's probably more important now than it was 50 years ago. Should have gone the other way, shouldn't it? You'd have thought with technology and relative wealth, Maslow's hierarchy of needs being met, we have shelter, we have food, we would have more time to focus upon working out what's true and what isn't. But yeah, I'm not seeing it myself. 10:39 is the time. Back to school. And the questions of what's it for and how do you judge whether it's working or not if you're not constantly testing children? Linda's in Bedford. Linda, what would you like to say?
Hiya, James.
Hello,
I wanted to start with an analogy, which I hope the gardeners among your listeners will understand. I always say you do not put a lime-loving plant into acid soil and then blame the plant when it doesn't thrive.
Oh, I like that.
But we do that to children every day of the week. I've been both a teacher and a youth worker, and I also worked on the then Financial Services Authority financial capability scheme and I was looking particularly at work with NEETs, which is quite topical at the minute as well. And there was a big drive to get financial education, for example, into school. The problem there for me, and I think it fits with lots of other aspects of the curriculum, is that they thought if we just teach you how to keep your money safe, how to open a bank account, all of those kind of things, you will do it. And you'll do it properly. Whereas for me, it's not just about that. It's also about your attitudes and your behaviours and your values, because they all impinge on how you manage your money. So that's just a small example. So for me, the school is there to prepare you for your life and to help you to get the absolute maximum out of it, to reach your full potential. So anything that's in the curriculum, particularly for those children and young people who are not academic, they need to be able to see the relevance of it to their lives. Now, when I went into youth work and changed, one of the things I used to joke about was I said I left teaching because I was interested in learning. And there was an element of truth in that, because I know you might have smaller groups that you're working with, but you can also use hooks in a way that a teacher can't always do, which is a bit about what you were saying, in terms of, finding what a young person is interested in and then seeing them thrive and develop. So I just think that's, if we start there, and I also say this as a parent of a very naughty boy when he was at school.
Right. Would you have used that
word?
Would you have used that word then?
What, naughty boy?
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, I mean, because it's hard to know what other words to use, isn't it? But it takes me back to that thing I can't I can't believe it took me so long to realise that when I was at school, between the ages of 7 and 13, it was the same 2 boys in every group of 20 that got beaten. So they weren't naughty. There was something else going on there.
Well, exactly. And with my son, he actually ended up they actually set up a naughty boys class.
Gosh.
And the only reason that I didn't make a fuss about it was the teacher was amazing. So, I thought that was better.
Did they call it that?
No, all the kids in school called it that.
Yeah. Can't stop that, can you?
But the thing is, we knew, he was a very bright boy and he just wasn't being stretched. He was just mischievous, getting phone calls to Mrs. I have to tell you that so-and-so has been suspended because he got the whole class to pull a moonie in front of the geography teacher. So we had all that kind of stuff going on all the time. Now, he has got a global videography and photography company. He's always travelling all over the world.
Finding something that he would be good at. Can I ask you, let me just steer you to a slightly different question. And why, if we were to go back 30 years, why do people have the idea that children, I mean, I don't know whether they were or not, this is where my own experiences are utterly blinkering, but this feels like a new problem. Certainly the scale of NEETs, the number of people not in education, employment or training, and a lot of them are going to be consequences of a failure to engage at school. But back when their parents or their grandparents were at school, it didn't seem to have such poor outcome. Maybe it did. It have, but have we always had really poor outcomes?
I think so. I'm just thinking when I was at the FSA, that was 20 years ago, and there were 1 million NEETs then, and that was why they were trying to focus on. So you have to remember sometimes it could just be because the spotlight is shining on something that we think is important. The spotlight shining, exactly. It's another moral panic. But I do think that the I know it's a different subject, but really the kind of decimation, although I know that's not how you should use that word, of the youth service over the last 10, 15 years has been extraordinary. And a lot of those kids I know would have been being picked up and infused by good youth work. And as you know, of all people, I can see anymore. No, I know it's not. And the places where it are happening are as rare as hen's teeth. It's something I was talking to Amelia de Moldenberg about the other day, the star of the chicken shop interviews, and I think for me, sort of one of the biggest talents on the internet at the moment, an absolute legend. But her big break, and she comes from a very middle class background. Her father was a councillor of Westminster Council. Her big break was in one of the places that you describe. It was in a sort of North London youth magazine where she managed to find her niche and discover what it was that she was good at. And those places don't exist on anything like the scale that they used to. It's why she's set up a charity dedicated to looking after them, and it's why we set up one in the memory of our late friend Andy Taylor, which tries to help people into spaces that they can't get into. And they are journeys into spaces that would once have been accelerated or eased by youth groups and youth workers. But you're right, we're back to Osborne's razor. If you are not familiar with Osborne's razor, it's a variation on Occam's razor. Thank you, Linda. Every time I mention Osborne's razor, I get 4 messages saying, I think you'll find it's Occam's razor. I know about Occam's razor. Osborne's razor is the love child of Occam's razor, and it means that when we're discussing the things about our country that feel measurably worse than they did 20 years ago, the reason is almost always George Osborne, and indeed austerity. So the NEETs, of course, 1 million NEETs, all graduates of Michael Gove's education system, but all victims, arguably, of George Osborne's austerity. George Osborne and David Cameron, who, in case you haven't been paying attention, remain entirely untouched by the horrors that they inflicted on this country. And, of course, they created the environment into which people like Boris Johnson and Liz Truss could effortlessly slide, not to mention Nigel Farage. But it's not him making the news this morning, it's his mate, the king of the Nepo babies, Richard Tice. More on that after this.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 10:49, of course, for Charlie and Matt and the rest of them. The reason why you go to school is to ogle Miss Mackenzie, the teacher, and then in some lyrics that perhaps wouldn't make the grade these days, to spy on her at home. I refer, of course, to the classic Busted track, That's What I Go to School For. But those are not acceptable answers to the question that I'm asking you today, which is, what is school for? And Lucy Powell, I think, is right when she says to provide a passport, but we need a little more on what is in that passport. What is in that passport and what is currently missing? And what's it like to be failed? Well, you're called a failure, but actually you've been failed. You're leaving school without a passport. Having said all of that, I think Adi makes a brilliant point. I just want to remind you, James, that not all the NEETs failed in school. There are lots of young people who did very well in school who are currently unable to find suitable work because there are not enough suitable jobs for young people. Please make that clear, says Adi in Dartford. You're absolutely right. I'm constantly pointing out that the idea that there's one prescription for 1 million people is ridiculous. We learned last week that about 100,000 of them are quite possibly not in education, employment or training because they're busy looking after a relative. who is disabled, who is in need of care. They are busy caring for a relative to such a degree that they can't commit to education, employment or training. The Bob scores are in. Even more entries this week than last week. The second week of Bob, the Burnham Optimism Barometer. What do you reckon? Are we more optimistic about Andy Burnham now, or has the gloss begun to fade, or are we identical? Will it be another 8 out of 10? Find out a little later in the programme. It's 10:51. Joanne is in Sunderland. Joanne, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, James.
Hello,
Hiya. I've just finished my 30th year as a primary school teacher.
30th year?
30th year.
Yeah, just wait there a second. Can we get someone with a bit more experience, please? Can we get someone... all right. Okay, apparently I haven't got anyone else. I'll have to listen to you for a while. Carry on, Joanne.
That's all right, Pet. So I think this morning I've listened to it with a lot of interest because I've seen many education secretaries over the years. I think primary's sort of been missed out a bit this morning, James.
Well, fill your boots.
The purpose of a primary school. So the purpose of a primary school is to teach our children basic skills, but that has changed dramatically over the years. So when I first started, children came in and they were ready for school, they could do all this, could do all that. Now we have children coming in who don't have those basic skills. They pick up a book and they try to swipe it instead of read it. They don't know how to play, they don't know how to engage. So a lot of our time in our early years is spent with those social skills, and it's vital.
Wow.
It's absolutely vital, because otherwise they can't learn.
So they're sitting at home and the parents are just not aware of what they should be doing or could be doing differently. It's not like a conscious decision to be negligent or delinquent. It's just the parents are spending their lives swiping away and scrolling. And this isn't even a class-based issue. The middle classes are probably a little bit more conscious of what the correct way to behave is, but they're just as susceptible to distractions. And so the kids are arriving at school, and this isn't like a tabloid exception that proves the rule, this is a common experience for you, that you're dealing with things that never would have happened before, or if they did happen, it would have set off alarm bells everywhere.
Absolutely. I mean, one of my many jobs is Senko, so I work very closely with our fantastic reception class teacher, and we try to pick our children up really quickly. So for speech and language problems, for social problems, they're our main areas. So we try to sweep in early, but I just feel like primary they're trying to make it a mini secondary, and that's not what we're about.
And when did that start? When did that start? Does it go?
I would say, and it's become a lot worse. I think I was saying that your lovely producer, it's pre and post COVID. My role's changed dramatically post COVID, but I just want them to listen to us. Just listen to us. Come into a primary school and see what we do. We'll test them when they come in. We'll test them in year 2, even though that's optional now. We'll give them the multiplication test in year 4. Then we'll test them again with SAT. And I tell you what, James, I also teach year 6. And for the 2 years we didn't have SAT, those bairns thrived. They thrived because I could just teach them as a teacher, not teaching to a test.
What if we had a defender of this system here now, and I said, why are you testing these little ones so much? What would they say?
Oh, data. Data. Every child is data. But they're not. They're bairns. They're little people.
And data is good to collect because...
Because it can be quantified. You can say, oh, look, they came in at this level, but look where they're going out now. And it's like, that's lovely, but... You want your bairns to do the best. I'm a mum of 2 who've done really well in this education system, but you want more from them than just a SAT score or a multiplication tables check score or a GCSE grade. You want them to be well-rounded people who are ready to face the world, and school should be that. And teach them critical thinking. Dear God, please teach them that.
I nearly said I wish you'd taught my children, but we were actually very lucky. No, we were very lucky. My children had wonderful teachers, so I don't want to make it sound like they didn't, but I can tell, I bet you have people coming back. You must have taught some of your former pupils' children, by now? Have you had them coming back round?
Not quite yet.
No,
I'm not a
nearly.
teacher,
Well,
Nana, yet.
30 years? All right.
I'm not a Nana teacher yet,
No,
but
nearly,
it'll happen.
It will happen. And what you suddenly made me realise, Joanne, I could listen to you all day, but you it's trust, isn't it? It's trusting teachers, and some of them maybe will betray that trust or get tired and get disillusioned. But what the system Gove brought in spoke to was an idea that teachers just need to be treated almost like children themselves. We can't just trust Joanne to run a good school. We have to have metrics and measures and data at every turn to say that's going well, that's going badly. You're in special measures. You can have an apple, you can have a biscuit, you can have a review. That's why Ofsted is so widely maligned as well, because it's trust, isn't it? It's your instincts, recognising your instincts, your talents, your vocation, and letting you do your thing.
Yeah, just let us do my job.
Yeah.
Like, I know what I'm doing. And I'm always striving to find out new stuff. I'm always looking to see, how I can improve things for my bands. But it's exhausting.
Of course,
it's really tiring.
And it's the children that lose out, actually, and also get to feel like failures because if they don't hit their targets, they don't get their marks.
Yeah.
Oh wow. We've done the Burnham Optimism Barometer. What do you think about your early thoughts on Lucy Powell? Is she saying the right things?
I'm a Sunday lass, and I was really disappointed with Bridget Phillipson, and she went to the same school as my bands went to.
Is that right?
Yeah, St Roberts. So I just want someone to listen to us. I think that's the main thing. You're great, whatever. You've got this title of education secretary, but come and talk to teachers. Don't talk to people who run big maths. Don't talk to these so-called, professional speakers and stuff like that who've not been in the classroom for 20 odd years. Come into a primary school, stay with us for a day.
And speak particularly to people like you who have mapped the change and who can actually identify what the challenges are today that are different from what the challenges were 30 years ago. And I think you're absolutely right about COVID. I don't think we had it. It's one of the reasons why I quite like the question earlier of what is school actually for, because I don't think that we realised, and I think that probably includes the teaching profession as well, of how much of what school was for had absolutely nothing to do with education in the classical sense. It certainly had absolutely nothing to do with things that can be assessed by data or collated as targets. It was literally about equipping children with social skills. I mean, even that word sounds anodyne and hollow, but it was about giving children what they needed to not be frightened of the world. And that's the phrase I think of now when I read of the NEETs. And it doesn't fit all of them. Some of them are itching to get out there, but every knockback takes away a bit of itch. But that idea of the world being a place that you need to become acclimatized to as you move away, as you cut the apron strings, you move away from the regimentation and the routine and the discipline of education into the workplace. But if you take a huge chunk of schooling out of a child's life, of a child's formative years, you're taking away an awful lot of the lessons that they would have learnt silently or would have learnt by almost educational osmosis rather than the classroom or the textbook. Joanne, thank you. Picking up on this point, actually, James, I totally agree, but having worked in education for 30 years in primary schools, I've seen data driving everything we do. So that's another. It's 2 30-year veterans of the primary school system. I'm on SLT in a school with a high percentage of disadvantaged children. My local authority and Ofsted don't care. They look only at the data points. They ask why my children aren't reaching the expected standard. We have collapsed all foundation subjects to try to get out of a hole, which means the children are now doing maths and English almost all day long. I know it's wrong, but if the results don't improve, then I will be held painfully accountable. I blame the chasing of data and the loss of children's identity. We drive children for test results rather than a broad and balanced curriculum. Please keep me anonymous, as I don't want any fallout if it is read out. And you're lucky that Eleanor read that before I did, because she got the warning not to say your name at the top of the message, which is what you need to do. Everybody, if you want me not to read your name out, don't put the thing at the end of the message, because if I read the first 2 lines and I think, oh, this sounds good, I'll read the rest of it without checking, which is why sometimes I might stop reading a message out halfway through when it all goes a bit weird. But there it is. I didn't read out the name, but absolutely endorsing what Joanne had to say about the tyranny, the dictatorship of data, if you like, the tyranny of testing. And something else that is alliterative that isn't quite springing to mind speedily enough. We'll return to elements of this conversation, and we may return this week, actually, to the authoritarian issue, another amazing story in the news about children responding and parents objecting to schools that are too strict. But I'm going to do the wealth tax next.
James O'Brien on LBC.
4 minutes after 11 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. The I newspaper, where I should probably declare an interest, despite having spent a long time telling you that it's a brilliant read, I am now one of their columnists, so I would be biased, wouldn't I? But the I newspaper has done some polling on the wealth tax. This isn't a phone-in, even I'm not that self-indulgent, but why do you think I haven't talked about the wealth tax in ages? It's been really present, hasn't it? I bet everyone else has done it as a conversation or as a report. Why haven't I? I don't really know. Part of the reason I haven't done it is because the arguments seem so well rehearsed. The idea that it hasn't really worked anywhere else, I don't know whether that stands up to proper scrutiny. That's probably my fault, isn't it, for not having undertaken the proper scrutiny. It wouldn't hit me, the one that the I newspaper has polled about. So a wealth tax on assets worth more than £10 million is apparently supported by 2/3 of the population, and support, according to this exclusive polling, shows that support comes from across the political spectrum. 73% would be happy with a rise in also want to see a rise in the basic tax rate threshold, frozen for 5 years. So the massive majority of people in favour of a wealth tax are also in favour of policies that would make them a little bit better off. Economists estimate that a wealth tax on assets above £10 million would raise £10 billion a year for the Treasury and affect 100,000 households. The right-wing media gets its tanks on your lawns at a rate of knots when stories like this are in the offing, and that is why I have got the idea, that is where I have got the idea from, that they've tried it in lots and lots of other places and it has never worked. The more I dig into it, the less true that seems to be. But I want to make it absolutely clear that it might be true. They're looking at the Paris School of Economics and King's College London when they refer to economists and academics who moot the possibility of a £10 billion a year figure with only 1,000 households affected. There was also a call last week from a group called Patriotic Millionaires, many of whom signed a letter stating that they should be paying a little more tax and they'd be comfortable with a 2% levy on wealth of over £10 million. What I think about this is the 2% on wealth over £10 million. Everybody is going to be earning more than 2% on their pot, right? So you're paying it essentially out of the interest that you are receiving or the profits you are making on your wealth. So it's a 2%. So they don't touch the first 10 million, right? And then your wealth over 10 million gets hit with a 2% levy. I mean, if you're worth 100 million, that's 2% of 80 million, which I think you're going to be making anyway. Listen, I'm just thinking out loud about fairness, because this is one of those tax rises that would not affect me. Normally, I like to give myself a little pat on the back for being such a stand-up citizen, such a patriotic person, because I'm in favour of paying a little bit more tax. I pay a lot of tax, actually. I'm not going to tell you how much tax because it makes my eyes water, but I pay a lot of tax. And 52% of the population, I don't know if you're aware of this, are not net contributors. 52% of households in this country are taking out more than they actually put in over the course of lifetimes, I think. There was some research into this. I read it in the Financial Times at the weekend. So that's one of the most patriotic things I do, is pay an absolute king's ransom in tax, and I like paying it, even as I find myself supporting people whose politics I might find abhorrent, even as the people that fall under the fall for the racist lies of various propagandists and populists, while actually not being net contributors to our treasury, blaming it all on immigrants, while in fact they are part of the problem, not the solution. I'm proud of that as well, because if we don't help them, who will? So normally when it comes to conversations about higher taxes, I can be a little bit holier than thou. I can't on this one. Just 10% of people opposed such a plan. 10%. That's a tiny figure. High wealth in the tax system, targeting it, found support from around 66% of adult Britons who would be behind this wealth tax on assets worth more than £10 million. Part of me is fascinated by the 10% who are never going to be near this threshold, but who are opposed to it. I don't think it's fair to say that you're brainwashed or stupid. I just don't. I mean, in some ways, I'd like to confine the conversation to you in a way. I'm not going to, because I'm a big fan of freedom of speech, a big fan of I can't even say the word, and yet I'm a huge fan of it. Plurality of inputs. I've always been fascinated by the people who think that they are somehow on the same team as the super wealthy. And when the super wealthy argue that they shouldn't be contributing more to the well-being of the society that has made them super wealthy or sustained their super wealth, then people who will never be super wealthy, people who will never even be wealthy by most measures, are cheering them along. And listen, there's a huge amount of efforts being put into it. Various newspaper owners, all plutocrats, all protecting their own wealth, all adamant that there should be less and less taxation on what they pass on to the next generation, all moving heaven and earth to avoid paying the sort of same levels of inheritance tax that my children will have to pay when I shuffle off this mortal coil. But that's not really the point of the conversation. The point of the conversation is the ethics of it. The ethics of it. I just want you to tell me, and you're allowed to ring in and say fair, right? So if you've got 11 million quid, I think you'd be paying about 20 grand a year as this so-called wealth tax kicks in. But I'm sort of challenging myself now to get the question right, because I don't always. Part of the reason why I've not done this conversation in the past is because I've heard it so many times. I want to hear a new conversation today, and I really need your help. You really came through for me on the education phone-in. I'm in my old age. I'm getting quite grouchy about new territory. I don't want to hear the same calls again and again and again. I am, however, as a few of you have already pointed out, I am going to reach for my John Steinbeck quote in a moment, which is part of the answer to the question of how people who will never be wealthy can be against a wealth tax on the super wealthy. But I think it's fair. I just think it's fair. If I had £11 million in the bank, the idea of paying £20,000 in order to just undo some of the damage done by Osborne's razor would, to me, be a no-brainer. That's probably one of the reasons why I haven't got £11 million in the bank. And I wonder whether there's some truth in that. I wonder whether, in order to achieve that sort of wealth, especially from a standing start, you have to prioritise the simple accumulation of money more than almost anything else. This isn't an insult, by the way, far from it. It's something that we do every hour on every programme. It's an attempt to understand something I don't currently understand. But I sit here and imagine, if I had £11 million in the bank, maybe I wouldn't be comfortable handing over 20 grand because I'd be thinking about what I might have spent that 20 grand on. Oh, hang on a minute. If I didn't have to pay my wealth tax, I could... What would you spend 20 grand on if you had £11 million in the bank that you can't afford if you've spent £20,000 on a wealth tax? So the calculations, my mental calculations, don't apply here. They don't seem to... They don't seem to deliver the no-brainer that this story seems to me to represent. The no-brainer, 10%, a tiny percentage on wealth over £10 million. So assets worth more than £10 million. All right, talk to me about that. So they're looking at the mortgage-free element of your home, right? They're looking at how much money you could release if you sold everything. So you've got £11 million worth of assets. But the only logical objection to this, I think, would be that you would find it a struggle to get your hands on £20,000. You've got £11 million worth of assets, but you'd struggle to get your hands on £20,000? I think you probably need some better financial advice, don't you? I don't know. I just want you to tell me why anyone would object to this, even if they've got the money. Do you see what I mean? I'm not getting it right. Hang on a second. Maybe I am getting it right. Quarter past 11 is the time. It's a 2% on assets in excess of £10 million. Maybe the thing I'm missing, maybe the point I'm missing is that this is actually a lot of money, and I'm suggesting that it isn't and that people would really notice it. But I think it's more about a personality type, isn't it? I wish I'd been more careful when I was younger, but I wasn't. It doesn't keep me awake at night. I had a wonderful time messing around, partying, buying things I couldn't afford, living beyond my means. I had a wonderful, wonderful time. I could have done something differently in my life. I could have set something up. You talk about how you need to have equity in something, you need to be selling something, you need to have something to sell. I got friends who were as rich as Croesus, and they've had great lives too. They're just built differently from me. And maybe it's not fair to take more. Well, no, it is. It just is fair, isn't it? It's just fair. 03456060973 is the number that you need. So, what is the issue for you here? That's the question. Just tell me about your relationship with this proposal. The idea that when we look at the society that we inhabit, the people who have got the most have benefited the most in financial terms from our shared resources. They've benefited from the education system because they have an educated workforce. They've benefited from the transport system because their business couldn't operate without decent transport links. They've benefited from the National Health Service because the National Health Service keeps their workforce healthy. These aren't going to apply to everybody who's got a ton of money, but, you know, there'll be other things you benefit from. You benefit from having a base, a home in a country that is a cultural hotbed. You benefit from being able to go and do things that you can't do in other places. There's history here. There's history, population, and luck. And if you've ended up with a ton of money, you are lucky. It's a patriotic thing to do, no? 03456060973. I always think Alan Sugar, I may be misremembering this, but I think Alan Sugar stuck a cheque once on Twitter showing how much income tax he paid. And I remember thinking, that's brilliant. What a legend. Look how much income tax that man is paying. I remember thinking, that's what we should be celebrating. Am I sounding nuts? Or am I just sounding like somebody who is talking sense in a world where almost all of the effort in our media is put into mocking voices like mine? Mocking voices. I mean, the real idiots say, well, if you want to pay more tax, you can. Why don't you pay it voluntarily? Which I think is such a boneheaded argument that you wonder whether or not the people making it should be allowed near scissors. But then you look at the fact that Boris Johnson got elected, that Brexit got voted for, that Liz Truss was described as an economic genius by the same newspapers that are furious at the prospect of a wealth tax. You look at the support for people like Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu among British people who have apparently been educated, and you realise people can be persuaded into almost any imaginable position, up to and including climate change denial. So, of course, you're going to be able to persuade people that they're against a wealth tax in the same way that you persuaded them Brexit was a good idea. Boris Johnson was a stand-up guy. Liz Truss was an economic genius. Austerity was a necessary corrective for the catastrophes caused by the greed of bankers right around the world. That Donald Trump is the best thing since sliced bread, and that Benjamin Netanyahu has got Israel's interests at heart rather than his own. You can persuade people of anything, absolutely anything. So, of course, you can persuade them that a wealth tax is a bad idea. Is that the point here? Is that why I'm struggling with the subject? Because it's just another thing to stick on the same list of the bleeding obvious, but a significant portion of our population has been persuaded to reject the evidence of their own eyes and ears. It's just fair. Where else are you going to get the money from? Get it off the scroungers. Well, who told you about the scroungers? Oh, the people that own the newspaper. Oh, yeah. Get it off the immigrants. Who's obsessing about the immigrants? Yeah. And what did they tell you about Brexit? They told me it would be brilliant. What did they tell you about Boris Johnson? They told me he was a legend. What did they tell you about Donald Trump? They told me I had Trump derangement syndrome when I kept pointing out what a wrong-un he was. Is the wealth tax just another... That's the question. 0345 6060 973. Is a tax on assets, a small levy on assets in excess of £10 million. So quite a lot of people in my inbox have already got it wrong. I'm not blaming you for that. If you've got £11 million, the tax would apply to 1 million of your £11 million, not to all 11 million. You get your first 10 million clear, and then you pay 2% on the excess. It's the will of the people. It's 73% of the population. Sorry, 66% of the population. Is it just another one on those lists? Is it just another thing that ordinary, decent people have been persuaded to oppose by extraordinary, indecent people? Is it another Brexit? Is it another Boris? I don't know. I think it probably is. But I want you to tell me your relationship with it, and particularly why you're against it, even though you will never in a billion years be required to pay it. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 22 minutes after 11. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where a little bit more detail on that story involving the Nepo King Richard Tice and an investigation into his financial affairs now. It's understood that the investigation relates to an alleged failure to declare an interest in Israel when speaking in Westminster Hall. I don't have any further detail on that, but is it business interest that he's got in Israel when hosting an event or speaking in Westminster Hall? I don't know, but that's what he is reportedly being investigated for. A Reform source described it as baffling, adding he was fighting anti-Semitism in Westminster Hall and it ends up in an investigation. It is almost certainly a little bit more complicated than that. I think Farage himself might actually be answering questions at the moment about his financial affairs at the end of an interview which was probably about immigration. That seems to me to be the only thing he can talk about now, and he'll be absolutely gutted that it's plummeting. But obviously he doesn't need to mention that. He'll probably be talking about the situation in Ceuta, which, as I explained to you an hour ago, is not as they would have you believe. Natasha Clark has the dubious pleasure of being present for that so-called press conference. She'll join us at about 12:45 to talk us about what has happened, and indeed to talk us through the latest revelations about Nigel Farage's financial affairs and political career. He's doing that thing I can see on one television screen. He's doing that thing where he sort of looks sort of faux shocked or faux outraged. So maybe they are actually allowed to ask some questions today. He's also extraordinarily brown, which Sarah Pochin's going to be furious about, isn't she? I mean, he honestly looks like a conker. I don't know where he spent the last few days. He could have just been in Margate, soaking up the rays there. But basically what we have, looking at a Nigel Farage press conference, is a brown face on our television screens. So poor old Sarah Pochin is going to be having a fit of the vapours. And staying with Reform, I've got a story for you a little later this hour about a cafe owner who has been feeding hungry school children and has somehow ended up having a bit of a run-in with a Reform councillor. It's an extraordinary story. I didn't do it on Friday because I didn't quite believe my eyes. Turns out it's all true. We'll talk to him and quite possibly the local MP as well. It's 11:25. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Before all of that, though, it's all about the wealth tax. If you've got 11 million quid in the bank and you can't afford 20 grand in a wealth tax, or if you've got 11 million pounds worth of assets and you can't afford 20,000 pounds, I suppose I'm saying it's a pittance, then it's time you cancelled your Netflix subscription and stopped eating all that avocado on toast, isn't it? Isn't it? Is it that simple? David's in Mallorca. David, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi there. I was coming at it from a slightly different angle in that it's, with some people, it's more about how that money will be spent rather than actually it being given. So, if you basically spend it, I mean, we're talking about all the reform and migration, etc., just as one angle. It's like, do you want your money to go to that kind of area and benefits, or would you rather it be spent on a better cause? And therefore, I think partly...
So where in the world do we get to define where our taxes go? Specifically, we can say you can spend it on that, but not on that. What's the precedent for that?
I hadn't thought it through that deeply. I think it's
we can think it through now. So you've got somebody on a relatively average income paying their taxes. They'd like to see loads more go to feeding school hungry children than they do to the army. What power do they have over that process?
Agreed. But then agreed. I mean, but then if you look at the army and some of the finances there's more money that goes on pensions than actually spending on defence.
So we're against pensions for soldiers now, are we?
Not at all.
Well, what then?
But I think
respectfully, I know you haven't thought it through, so I mean, that's fair enough. Next time, maybe do. But respectfully, all of the objections to it sound like this, don't they? It's, well, no, I'm absolutely fine paying more, but I just need to know this, that or the other. But none of us ever... You can look at the tax pie chart on the HMRC website. You can see exactly where your taxes go in percentage terms, and the things that populists and far-right figures like to pretend it all goes on are usually close to negligible. Social care is absolutely huge. So let's say that the majority of your wealth tax will go on social care. What's the problem with that?
Not at all. No issue. With an ageing mother, 100%.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I completely agree. But I think where I'm coming from is I think that's some people's objections. It's where it's spent.
It's not, though. I said this is where I'm coming from. Is I'm saying it's not, though. That's a cop-out. For the reason I've just demonstrated to you, is that nobody gets to say what their tax does and doesn't get spent on. That's the price of being a member of a civilised society.
Yep.
Your governments decide what tax gets spent on, and we elect government. So you've already got that process. And if 73% or 66% of the population want a wealth tax, then they've decided that they want it.
Yep. Yeah, for me, it's more a case of if I've got the money and it's a lot of money in the bank. I mean, you keep referring to 11 million. That would be a lot of money. Yeah. But I think.
But 20,000 wouldn't be, would it?
It wouldn't be. But to your point, you made a really good point earlier in that. Is it liquid? Is it tied up in?
Yeah, but you've got 11 million pounds of taxable assets. You can find 20 grand without even noticing. It's probably down the back of the sofa.
You'd hope not, but
I'm not even joking. And thanks for being a good sport, because I don't think that anyone's got a better argument than you've got, and they do sound like quibbles, if you like, or like wriggles, or like weaselly little ways out of doing what I would loosely describe as your patriotic duty. But I could be wrong. I mean, I really could be wrong. Someone could just come in and say, yeah, but what about this? It's like when we're talking about. Let's talk about it now. So you've got people living in big old houses. Well, not £10 million, though. You're talking about the property tax, and somebody points out, we took about 4 calls in a row from people in Islington. I'm not joking. They were all actually in Islington, who'd bought relatively modestly priced properties 30, 40 years ago and ended up living in some of the most expensive real estate in the country, and largely mortgage-free. But they don't want to move, and they haven't got access to the liquidity, to the liquid assets that David refers to. So I can see that argument. If you bought your house for 40 grand 40 years ago and it's now worth 4 million, and they're going to be taxing you on the worth of your house in excess of $1 million, so you're paying a small tax on 3 million. You've got to find that every year. You don't actually have any spec. You might be old and retired. You might be on your own. So there might be another one. There might be a zinger here. It is 11:30, and if you've got a zinger, I want to hear it. After Dominic Ellis brings you the headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:33 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where I've got a horrible feeling that the reason why I haven't had a phone in about the wealth tax before is because I've been gaslit. So the things I've got in my locker, it's been tried in lots of other places and it never works. So let's not have a phone in where it'll just be sort of Jeremy Corbyn fanboys ringing in to grind their very reasonable axes, but without any substantive progress being made. I've got a horrible feeling I've been gaslit. I'm sitting here thinking, oh dear, it's just a boring phone in. It's the opposite. Imagine if I had never talked about Brexit. Chances are you never would have heard of me. Imagine if we hadn't managed to fight our lonely corner, pointing out the absurdity of Boris Johnson or the horrificness of Donald Trump being president. The first time, never mind the second time. And all those people shouting, Trump derangement syndrome. They've all gone quiet now. The Daily Telegraph columnist writing about how Liz Truss's budget, in the words of the Sunday Telegraph editor Alistair Heath, was the best budget I have ever seen. Austerity. Remember? Don't blame the bankers. Do you remember that? Don't blame the bankers for the thing the bankers done. Blame librarians. Blame librarians and youth workers. They're the people. And Sure Start centres. Shut down the Sure Start centres. We've got to save the money somehow. Just don't blame the bankers for losing it all. So, is the wealth tax just another part of that process? My antennae, my absolutely faultless antennae have just gone a little bit haywire on this. Of course, you've got 11 million quid. You should be paying 20 grand a year. Of course you flipping should. It's not even a debate. Or is it? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Luke is in Kings Langley. Luke, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, mate. So I've been doing a bit of thinking about the whole wealth tax thing. The point I wanted to make was that when you look back over the last sort of 80 years, 70, 80 years, post-war we had higher taxes on the rich, and then the following decades, ordinary working people were able to afford houses, a nice life for their children, often on one income. And as the decades went on, taxes were eased on the rich, leading right up to today. And also, when we hit a time of crisis, you've got 2008 financial crisis and also COVID, where we had quantitative easing, which then after COVID, of course, we saw rising inflation.
Yes.
Whereas I think in a time of crisis, you need to be taxing the rich more to help the country recover. And, I think we've seen the opposite, really. And the continuation of asset.
You're very wise to speak generationally. I mean, when the Beatles slung their rooks out of the country, the top tax rate was in the 90s. I mean, no one's even talking about going anywhere near that. But you're right, the national mood music was so different that it was felt people who've got the lot should, at this point, put their shoulder to the wheel and push. And this is a relatively tiny amount. This is like 20 grand if you've got 11 million pounds. I'm just going to stay there a second, will you, Luke? All right? And tell me if you think I sound a bit rude. If you don't stop sending me texts saying, please tell James that 2% of 11 million pounds is 220,000 pounds, not 20,000 pounds, I'm going to ban you from the programme. The whole point is that you get the first 10 million clear. So it's 2% of what you have in excess of 10 million. So 11 million minus 10 million equals, everybody trying to give me a maths lesson, 11 million minus 10 million equals 1 million. And 2% of 1 million is £20,000. So stop. I fully accept that my maths over the years that we've spent together has occasionally been suboptimal. But I would not make this mistake more than once. And I didn't. So, right, thank you. Now, go away. Was that all right, do you think, Luke? Do you think I lost my temper a bit there? Or do you think I managed to reel it in?
No, I think that's perfectly reasonable, yeah.
So you got 11 million pounds worth of assets, and they're saying, can we have 20 grand a year? Who could possibly say, oh, no, that's not fair?
Well, exactly. I would even argue 2% isn't anywhere near enough, but it's
all right,
good
Jeremy Corbyn.
To get people who are on the fence about it,
yes,
to more than likely go for it. But, it's not even just like the the right-wing voters like to use that phrase.
No, it's not.
Was it rob Peter to pay Paul? Is it?
It's not. It is. You're talking about. This is why I just had that little moment before you came on where I started thinking, what if I've been gaslit too? I spend my life sticking it to all the people that fell for all the other things. But what if this is just another one? Is that the public discourse has been so completely defined and corrupted over the last, as you say, 30, 40, 50 years, that we're now talking about this as if it isn't the most obvious and simple thing imaginable.
Because that's right. Is. I think most problems in our society today can be traced back to wealth inequality.
Yeah.
Including, education, government spending.
And if you were a beneficiary of that epic inequality, if you were on the right side of it, what would you be telling people to think about welfare claimants and immigrants?
Well, exactly. Of course, I'll be telling my media outlets that I own. I would be telling them to push those stories.
Let's go big. Let's go big on the immigrants. Won't somebody think of a billionaire? Luke, lovely stuff. Thank you, mate. It's coming up to 20 to 12. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Listen, that's part of the problem, isn't it? My sort of slightly performative anger a moment ago about the numbers is that people take that away. They thought, oh, God, that's a bit harsh. You've got to find 220. Oh, no. So you give people 10 million quid clear, right? Who can possibly argue? Well, someone will. It's 20 to 12 from Kings Langley to Newton Abbot. Jordan's there. Jordan, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello.
Very privileged to speak to you. A little bit nervous.
It's not a privilege, mate. Hopefully it'll be a pleasure, but it's never going to be a privilege. Thank you. What do you want to say?
I just wanted to say I'm quite into this sort of subject. I've listened to a lot of Gary Stevenson. Obviously, you've had him on Full Disclosure.
Yes.
So I just wanted to say, any of you or your listeners, I'm in favour of a wealth tax, obviously being a fan of Gary Stevenson. If his second to last video explains perfectly why a wealth tax is very necessary, just explains how governments have basically sold off all their assets over sort of since the 80s, kind of Thatcher, and why the need for a redistribution of wealth is really essential.
Well, give me your version. What's persuaded you? What are the things that you would argue against somebody saying? Because the people that fascinate me most, and it's probably a little bit unfair to call them forelock tuggers or capped offers, but the people who are never going to be close to having to pay it, who have been happily and successfully persuaded that it's a terrible thing, that it's unfair, that it's wrong. What do you reckon?
Well, I think like your last call or second to last call explained about the so obviously after World War II we had high taxes on wealth, and people will be able to afford homes and a decent family life. Whereas now you can't, and that was because we had high taxes on wealthy people. But governments have basically been funding their spending through kind of what Gary Stevenson puts it, selling off the family gold.
So they need to get some of that money back, as it were. They need to fill some of those holes.
They've just been selling. Now the government literally has no assets left. Whereas when the government had assets, the rich people will lend you money because they know that you've got assets that you can sell to them. Now we're at the point where the government literally has nothing left. They're just funding us on deficits. Now they're not allowed, they're not being lent any more money now. That's why we're seeing the welfare state just essentially being cut, to the bone. So the only way to raise this money is to raise tax, and it's been raised too much on middle classes. So the ideal situation for me would be a wealth tax of sort of 2%. But the other thing I wanted to just mention was there's an French economist, I don't know if you've heard of him, called Gabriel Zucman.
Yes, he's written the book about why we should tax billionaires.
He's read a really good, short, brilliant book about how to tax billionaires. He's basically a designer of the wealth tax in France. And he goes into... So his application is slightly different to what you're saying, is 2% on 100 million, but it's a minimum tax. So he says it's not just random. It's the researchers kind of given them this idea that anybody who generally most people with a wealth of below 100 million generally pay at least 2% of their wealth a year on tax. So it's classed as a minimum tax because the research has showed them that when you kind of go over 100 million, that's when these super rich kind of...
That's when you almost become nationless and move in ways that are mysterious to the rest of us. That's why I don't know, I forget whether the writer you refer to does this, but that's why many also advocate for an exit tax. I think there might be an exit tax in Norway. Because that's great stuff, Jordan. Thank you. No Hostages points out that what sinks a wealth tax is lobbying, not necessarily logic. Lobbying. Why do you think climate change was denied so successfully for so long? Spoiler alert, lobbying. Why do you think we are still pouring processed food down our children's necks, even as we weekly clock the obesity crisis? Yeah, lobbying. Why do you think that countries that are undertaking genocide can retain enormous support from other democracies in the world? Answer, lobbying. I mean, lobbying is the root of almost all of the things that are against the interests of the general population. It's lobbying. Why do you think Brexit happened? Lobbying. It's lobbying. And the wealth tax could be killed by lobbying. The wealthy lobby for the loopholes, the exemptions and the discounts, and they point to the hollowed out tax system and say, look, it doesn't work. So the sabotage becomes the argument against the policy. So they say, we don't get a wealth tax because everyone will leave. Okay, well, we'll have an exit tax as well. So we'll have an exit tax of 10%. We'll have a wealth tax of 2% on your assets over 10 million, right? If you don't like that and you're going to take your assets somewhere else, we'll have an exit tax of 10%. So we'll take 10. Do you see what I mean? And that's still barely going to touch the sides of your wealth, but it would also be a reminder of why you decided to live here in the first place. Because if the only reason you live in the United Kingdom is because of its billionaire-friendly tax laws, I've got a bridge I'd like to sell you. It's great living here. It's a wonderful country, wonderful, especially if you're lucky enough to live in London or Kidderminster. These are the two finest conurbations in the history of humanity. So I just think the reason why my voice is a bit weird, or why I'm sounding a bit weird, is because I'm having one of those moments where I think I've been gaslit. I think I'm quite bright, right? I like to think sometimes I can see through all the noise, I can see through all the nonsense. I like Gary Stevenson. But why have I pushed these thoughts to one side? Oh, it's a bit more complicated than that. Or maybe things are this, that, or the other, or da-da-da-da-da. Actually, I've been gaslit into thinking that this isn't a no-brainer. I think I have, unless you can tell me otherwise, which you are free to do after this.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:49 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. There's I've never stopped there. I've only ever driven past it. A place in Hounslow that advertises free hot meals. It's just on a normal shop parade. Free hot meals for people who are hungry. I keep meaning to pop in and find out what the story is. It's probably got some religious roots or something like that, but there are decent people out there doing their best to do decent things in very difficult times, and we should all celebrate them. Sadly, not everybody seems to see it that way. Barry Ashley runs the Grumpy Cook Cafe in Hastings, and has taken it upon himself to feed the children of struggling families over the school holidays, despite the fact that the local council had elected to withdraw the voucher scheme that would previously have subsidised the serving up of free meals to hungry children. I think I've got the facts right. But happily I can check, because Barry Ashley from the Grumpy Cook Cafe in Hastings joins me now. Barry, I've not seen your face before, mate, and I am similarly cursed with a resting grumpy face. Would I be right in thinking that the cafe is named after you?
It is, yes.
Yes. We have a similar sort of facial curse, I think. But here we are, both smiling. So have I got the facts right? Is that pretty much how things unfolded, how you found yourself? What is shocking is the response from the head of the council, Andy Woolley.
Yes, it all started. It's not the local council's Hastings Borough, but this is East Sussex County.
Right.
I picked up on it from when the MP Helena Dollymore spoke out on Facebook. and I've done this for the last 5 years. So when Marcus Rashford and Tom Kerridge started doing some good things during lockdown, I did my own thing then, and I've continued it since. So I've always offered like free breakfast breakfast cereal for children in the mornings. They can just come in and help themselves. So when I saw what Helena had to say about what East Sussex had done, I threw all my toys out the pram, and I got rather annoyed, and foolishly I went to Facebook, did a video and said, right, I'm just going to feed all the children, just come to the cafe, lunch is free. Now, but before I'd done that, I'd already introduced a scheme for this summer about it's like a pay it forward scheme where people can pay it forward for a family of 4 to take a picnic to the coast or to the park. So again, if they're struggling, because we found out so many children have never been to the beach in a coastal town.
Really?
It's just incredible. So we were doing that, and I thought, well, what the hell? Let's just make it free all round. So they can eat for free in the cafe, or they can go to the website and choose a family box, and that'll be ready for them to collect the next day.
So, I mean, your anger chiefly was about the fact that the vouchers were being taken away.
Yeah, it was being taken away, but also in the new document, it actually said that the council must ensure that the poorest children are not going hungry during the school holidays. And that's what I've been...
You knew that they were, and that they were more likely to, or much more likely to do so in the absence of this voucher scheme.
Yeah, well, I thought they would be, but they're not.
Because of you?
No. They have said that they've got all these schemes running, but they're not actually making sure that the poorest children are being fed.
So this is where things get very odd, isn't it? Because you and indeed the local MP Helena Dollimore, you recorded your unhappiness about these decisions, and you, I think inevitably, because it would be quite hard to do it without doing so, you directed some of your unhappiness at the council chief, at Andy Woolley, and it's what happens next that I think is going to shock my listeners most. So how did he respond to this robust but entirely legitimate criticism?
Well, worst of all, he interrupted me. I was just about to settle down to watch the Grand Prix last Sunday.
Outrageous.
And I got a text, I got a WhatsApp message from him saying that I was inciting hatred because I had named him personally. The person that leads the council, the public official, I'd actually named him personally. So that was inciting hatred, and he was reporting me to the police.
Just for naming him, you didn't call him a moron or anything like that?
No.
Just like literally, the council chief is this person, and this is his name.
And all I was asking for was, what are they doing in regards of Section 44 in the Crisis and Resilience Act? And he names everything except what they're doing there.
And then Ms. Dollimore got an email that I don't know if I've read yours, but he wrote, your continued naming of me personally has led to an increase in online abuse of me personally and has now reached a point where you could be responsible for inciting hate and potential violence against me, a political official and members of my family. You of all people should be aware of the increased sensitivity of these sorts of posts since and then he references the tragic death of Anne Widdicombe, which we can't talk about in further detail because of the live case. So because, he mentioned, I knew Anne Widdicombe vaguely. I'm not sure she would necessarily approve of her name being used in an attempt to close down the naming of an elected or of a senior politician, a Reform UK politician. As such, I shall be reporting you both to the police and to the Parliamentary Standards Committee. I mean, these are, of course, Nigel Farage's colleagues. They are the great upholders of free speech, they tell us, in this country. And what he's objecting to is you telling people his name.
Yes. And I got the same email as Helena got.
I thought you did.
It's just that he wasn't reporting me to the Speaker of the House.
So she gets reported to the Speaker of the House. You just get reported to the old Bill.
Yeah. And then I was just going to ignore it. I thought, I'm not going to make a scene of it. I thought, shall I contact Helena? And I didn't.
Right.
But during the time I was having that thought, Helena contacted me because she was concerned that, I'd be worried about this action that he was taking. So,
and she reassured you. She reassured you, I imagine, that the fella didn't have a leg to stand on.
She did.
And here we are. Have you heard? I don't know if Eleanor spoke to you before you came on. What Councillor Woolley told us when we got in touch with him earlier today.
No, go on.
He told us that he's not reported you to the police or Miss Dollimore to the police, and that no one should face a police report for criticising a council decision. He also said that Mr. Ashley's Cafe is doing a good thing by feeding children. It's almost like the media still has some power in this country, Barry, isn't it? He said his contact with Sussex Police was through a specific route to support elected members who receive threats and abuse, which no one is suggesting you or Helena Dollimore had issued towards him or who had directed at him, but he says that he and his family have faced abuse in recent weeks. He made clear that he does not hold you or Ms. Dollimore responsible for the abuse, even though, well, we read that thing that he sent to you, and said no child in East Sussex should go hungry this summer. So there we go. Game over.
Next time, James, I'll just call you and Eleanor, see if you can get some answers for me.
Well,
It's just ridiculous.
There was one wonderful bit that you did, because I thought, actually, that I was the only person left in England who uses this phrase. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about, yeah. And I will own up. I got it from you. And
did you?
We were talking. Yeah.
Oh, this is terrible news, because that means I might still be the only person in the country. Finally, Councillor Woolley, should you go for re-election into office again, I hope voters wrap your sandwiches and those of your party in a roadmap. If people want to support what you're doing down in Hastings, how do they find out more? How do they get in touch, Barry?
Go to our website, grumpycook.co.uk, and once they hit on the landing page, it will take them there. And all the response has been incredible, absolutely incredible. It's come from it's all around the country. All from pages that I follow on social media who I thought would never ever hear of me in a lifetime. And I'm getting donations from abroad as well. So it's quite incredible that when you choose to starve children, that people get rather upset.
They do, and then attack the people who are trying to feed them. Barry, it's been a pleasure. Let's hope that no one ever wraps your sandwiches in a roadmap, mate. Well, there you go, Barry Ashley there, who runs the Grumpy Cook Cafe down in Hastings, as you heard. I think we can all agree that, abusing public figures is a terrible thing to do. At the time at 12 noon, sorry, I just leant on the wrong button. I think we can all agree that abusing public figures is an absolutely terrible thing to do. But of course, Barry didn't call Councillor Woolley names. He didn't insult him. He didn't say anything unpleasant.
No. That was that moron. That was that moron O'Brien that comes on this channel after you, and no wonder my security detail's as big as it is. It's because of people like him.
So there it is. This kind of fella down in Hastings trying to link valid criticism of him and his decisions, as he subsequently admitted, to the tragic death of Anne Widdecombe, and Nigel Farage there claiming that telling people what he's doing and what he's like somehow endangers his safety. And that's going right back to shortly after he helped incite the Farage riots after those horrible murders in Southport. The other thing that story reminded me of with regards to councillors who were on Nigel Farage's ticket was the extraordinary scenes at Kirklees Council back in May of this year, when the recently elected councillor Sarah Wood kind of said the quiet part out loud.
I don't understand the Constitution. I have not had sufficient time to read that as yet. I don't understand what standing orders are, what they're made up of, nor do I understand what an amendment is. There is a possibility that we might vote for something that we don't understand at the moment. And whereas ignorance is not a defence, risk should be mitigated.
So there it is. I don't know what figure of speech to deploy at that point, but, you know, that's democracy in action and indeed freedom of speech. It's 12:01.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 5 minutes after 12 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I didn't know that. So I read that story in the Mirror last week about Barry at the Grumpy Cook Cafe down in Hastings, and I literally read that line about having your sandwiches wrapped in a road map. And I get so many messages off you every time I use that phrase saying, are you sure that's a figure of speech, James? I've never heard it before. It's an old Irish colleague of mine who used to use it all the time as a figure of speech for getting fired. The idea being that you get your sandwiches to eat on the journey and they're wrapped in a road map so that you can find your way home. You get your sandwiches wrapped in a road map as a figure of speech or a euphemism for getting sacked from work. But I get sent probably half a dozen messages saying, what are you talking about? Either saying, what does that mean? Or saying, I've never heard that one before. Are you sure it's actually in common parlance? So when I read in the Daily Mirror last week, at the end of last week, that Barry, the cafe owner down in Hastings, who'd been threatened with a report to the police in response to criticisms of the local council leader, the East Sussex County Council leader. When I read that one of the things that he was being attacked for was suggesting that he hopes that voters wrap your sandwiches in a road map, I found myself thinking, I do this thing, right? So I found myself thinking, I wonder if he got that off me. And then my inner voice, or Eleanor, if I had shared it with her, would go, oh, for God's sake, it's not all about you, you know. God, for goodness, you know, people are perfectly capable of arriving at figures of speech that you use a lot without actually having got it off you, you know, O'Brien, you irredeemable... And it turns out that I had to ask him. I hope you understood why. So it's a lovely phrase, wasn't it? Isn't it? And I'll be using it again. We've missed it for a while. And I forgot to do the Steinbeck quote in the first hour, which is a reflection upon, or the second hour, on why people who are never even going to be wealthy have been persuaded to be opposed to a wealth tax. John Steinbeck had a theory on this. He said that there are many... there is no such thing as poverty in Dust Bowl era America, just temporarily frustrated millionaires. So even if you're skint, one day you'll be a millionaire. Therefore, you are on the side of the millionaires when it comes to questions of taxation. It's 8 minutes after 12 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. We've got the results of the Bob. My crack team of statisticians have been calculating and crunching, and the Burnham Optimism Barometer, I'm going to tell you in a moment, if I remember. I'm going to build up a little bit of tension. The Burnham Optimism Barometer has delivered its second reading, the second finding, and stay tuned to find out where the figure is now. Last week it was 8, so we crunched millions of entries, millions of people. Text it. I can't say that, apparently. Obviously it's not, there's only 1.5 million people listening in total. All right, many, tens of people have been in touch with their figure. A mark out of 10 for how optimistic you're currently feeling about Andy Burnham. Last week the figure was 8. This week the figure... We got any music or anything like that? We haven't, have we? We haven't got any like production. We've got no jingles. Got nothing. So, all right, I'll do it myself. This week the figure. Last week the figure was 8. This week the figure is 8. Again, it's also 8. 2 8s. 2 fat ladies. Can you say that anymore? Back at the bingo, it would have been 2 fat ladies, wouldn't it? 88. 66, clickety click. I'll put my teeth in and say that. Anyway, we turn our attention next to Congo Chris Philp. Why does he call him Congo Chris Philp? Google it. Congo Chris Philp is back in the news, saying that he's going to solve 36,000 crimes a year. That, while doing that and invading France single-handedly, that is quite a busy week for Chris Philp. Not only is he going to war against France, he is also... planning to solve 36,000 more crimes a year by telling police to track down stolen phones and bicycles. There are 2 ways into this. One is quite funny, one probably isn't. The first is police officers. How do you feel Because what I'm doing is I'm sitting here reading this story from Congo Chris about how he would set new standards in policing. It's almost like these people forgot that they were in charge for 14 years, isn't it? They've only been out for 10 minutes. I know what we could do. We could get the police to track down stolen... How long were you in power for? 14 glorious years. Did you do this when you were... Nope. We were far too busy doing important stuff like stopping the boats, and painting over murals, and shutting Sure Start centres and youth... So anyway, Congo Chris Philp, 14 years of Tories in power. It never occurred to any of them to tell the police to track down stolen phones and bicycles. Stolen phones and bicycles. And you know, he might be an irredeemable fool, but I have something of a soft spot for one element of what he has been saying. But too often the police do nothing with that information and the crime is written off while the property sits at a location everybody involved in can see on a map. Now, that's not happening on 36,000 occasions, but mathematics is not Congo Chris's strong point. Well, actually, that's not fair. Geography is not Congo Chris's strong point, but he's not brilliant at mathematics either. So we hear stories anecdotally, and I guess it qualifies as anecdotally if we've heard it on this programme. We hear stories of people who have, and I mean, it happened to me actually in Ireland with one of my children, and I could see her phone after it had been half-inched down at Temple Bar one night, and I could see her phone out in Wexford somewhere. So you know some fella's got her, possibly a young woman, possibly an old woman. I don't know why I'm being ageist and sexist. A human, possibly, well, it could have been probably a human, has got my daughter's stolen phone, and we could see it on the thing. And you're sort of thinking, and this is obviously not a British police force, you're sort of thinking, well, surely if I can find it. My wife lost her phone once. And she did actually lose it. It wasn't stolen. This was in the very early days of the tracking technology, and I kind of tracked it down to a relatively small corner of Chiswick down by the railway line. I knocked on someone's door, and they said they didn't have it. I brought a bottle of wine with me as a kind of clever little move, you see, like a charming little... and it wasn't them. And so, you know, it's not entirely reliable, that the little thing you see on your screen. And then as I was walking home, someone rang me from her phone. So because I'd put one of those emergency messages on it. And it was actually just on the other side of the road. It was somebody on the other side of the road that had the phone. So I went and I gave them the bottle of wine. I rescued my wife's phone and I took it home. Now, the reason I did that is not because I'm a crime-fighting brave man like Congo Chris Philp. The reason I did that is because I knew she'd lost it. So I knew she'd lost it in the street. And because she dropped her bag, and anyway, I won't bore you with the details, went under some leaves, something like that, got a bit broken, but not broken enough that they couldn't read the screen. So because I knew that it hadn't been robbed, I was probably more confident to go, because if it had been robbed and I knocked on their door and said, hello, Sherlock O'Brien here, I believe that you may be in possession of my lovely wife's telephone. And they'd just say, no, I'm not. Clear off or I'll beat your face in, or something like that. But because I knew it had been lost, I went round and I found it. I found the phone. Not, I grant you, as a direct consequence of having the tracking technology, but I was very, very close. And I don't really understand why, when you can see your phone, your laptop, or even perhaps your car, didn't Giles Corran write an article about his car, or your bike, why it is not easier for the police to get hold of them. But here's where me and Congo Chris differ, all right? I'm pretty sure that most police officers listening to this programme are not sitting there going, oh, yes, good grief, thank the Lord for Congo Chris. We can use the tracking technology on the phones and the laptops and we can go and find the stolen gear using our... Oh, thank the Lord for Congo Chris. He's just made my job infinitely easy. So on the one hand, I'm thinking the police are already aware of this. On the other hand, and this is where I might be wrong, this is where Congo Chris might be clever and I might be a little bit dozy, or indeed, as Nigel Farage said on national radio, a moron. But remember, you shouldn't be insulting people or speaking ill of people in the modern political climate. I think that the police not only already know about this technology that's available, but I think that there is a very good reason why they don't do it. Now, it could be resources, it could be simple logistics. They certainly don't encourage you to do it to you go around and try and secure your own property, although I think the temptation in many cases, and I may in fact ask you what happened when you decided to do it yourself in a moment, but I don't think, here's the thing, and this is where I might be a sweet summer child, this is perhaps where I'm being naive and Congo Chris is the clever one, I don't think the police are doing it for reasons of laziness, incompetence, or failure to understand the modern technology that's available. I just want a police officer to tell me why you're not doing this already. All right? 0345 6060973. And I'm even going to leave the politics out of it. I'm going to ignore the fact that for 14 years, Congo Chris's party were in charge and they didn't do this, despite the fact that the technology was around for all of that period. There is something, and I speak from experience now, there is something uniquely frustrating about being able to see your stolen goods on a screen and saying to the police, they've got my laptop. It's the flats around the corner, for example. Even when we got burgled back in, how old's my oldest now? Good Lord, 20 years ago. And the police said to us, it's one of 2 or 3 households on this estate who've probably done it. They're responsible for almost all of the break-ins. And I said, well, can't you just go and knock on their door and go in? And they said, no, we can't. We can't just turn up because they are known burglars and demand that, you know, and search their house. So there were reasons back then. Today, it's different. You've got just cause, haven't you? If I hold up my phone, look, here it is, there it is, it's in number 17 Acacia Avenue. They've got my phone. They've got my phone. Number 17 Acacia Avenue. Can you send an officer to come with me to number 17 Acacia Avenue? And then what do you think actually happens? That's what I want to get to. I want to get to the reason why the police don't do it. That's 36,000 thefts, according to Congo Chris. If you don't know why we call him Congo Chris, just Google it. That's 36,000. How many are likely to actually involve somebody opening the door, Fingers McGreevy, the well-known thief, the well-known pickpocket, opening the door and go, oh, bang to rights, Gov, you got me, you done me up like a kipper, and then handing over a pillowcase full of phones. I think it must be a little bit more complicated than Congo Chris allows. So the reason why we have AirTags and the reason why we use Find My is so that we can find stuff that we've lost and track stuff down. I don't think it's so that we can solve crimes. So here are your 2 questions, okay? Question number 1, why don't the police do it already? 0345 6060 973. Because it might be a no-brainer that Congo Chris has accidentally stumbled into. Why don't the police do it already? 0345 6060 973. And then, on a much lighter note, hopefully, I mean, goodness knows, it might have some grim responses, but I just want to know how you've used this technology yourself. I love these stories. Do you remember the one? Didn't that fella... What happened, Eleanor? He sold his phone, but the bloke who bought it was a scammer, and somehow the money was in his account but not in his account. But he had the bloke's address because he'd already sent them the phone when he realised that the money hadn't landed. So he drove, I'd like to think, the entire length of the country. I can't remember the exact details, but I think it was all the way from Land's End to John O'Groats. He drove all the way from Land's End to John O'Groats. And when he got there, he tried to persuade the postman. So he got there while the postman was arriving to deliver the phone that this bloke had stolen off him by somehow making it look like there was money in his account when there wasn't. And the postman said, I can't give you somebody else's... I can't remember how the story ended, but I think it involved him chasing the postman around the streets of John O'Groats and then beating him over the head with a soft parcel until he surrendered the stolen phone. I forget the exact details, but I like stories about how you have used the tracking technology to track... Don't know why I was searching for a different verb there. Well, you have used the tracking technology to track your property, either stolen or lost, all right? That's what I want. And obviously, you know how this show works. Don't just ring in and say, oh, yeah, I used the technology and I found my phone on a bench and I went home again. I want a good story on 0345 6060 973. But here's an example from Troy. This is not what I want. Dear James, a few days ago, I lost my house keys in my house and I tracked them down using an AirTag to the washing machine. That's not what we want. That's not a good story. So I want to know why the police don't already do this, because Congo Chris thinks he's spotted a fantastic loophole in the way that you've been conducting your duties for the last 16 years. Why don't the police already do this? And what happened when you did? Did it work? I'll take stories of failure, disaster, or success. 0345 6060 973. It's 12:20.
James O'Brien on LBC.
What's the biggest thing you've put an AirTag on as well? I mean, I know cars have got tracking technology, so they're pretty big. But what's the big? Could you put an air? What could you put in a mass? What's mass? What do most of us own that's really big that isn't a car? Not a lot, really. Do they? Garden furniture? Could you put an AirTag on garden furniture? What if you've got a really expensive tree in a pot in your garden or something like that? Anyway. Why don't the police already do it? Because Congo Chris Philp thinks he's had a genius idea. And what happens when you did use the technology that he's talking about in an article, you guessed it, for the Daily Telegraph, about why the police... Hey, I've got a great idea. The police could solve loads of crimes by using Find My iPhone. Michael's in Merton. Michael, what have you got?
Hi there. So I'm a police officer for 12 years, and I also lead a team of police officers who investigate phone snatches and everything.
Oh, yes.
The reason why we're not able to just go into somebody's house because a phone's tracking there is because it's just not feasible.
How dare you? That's the attitude that's brought this country to his knees. Congo Chris says it's feasible, so stick that in your pipe and smoke it.
Politicians telling police officers how to do their job, that's not new. So the tracking isn't that great, especially if you live in a house in London. The iPhone could track to a block of council flats.
Yes.
And you can't narrow it down. It's not possible. Or it tracks to a residential street, mid-terrace houses. It gives you a radius of 10, 20 metres. You can't just go around searching people's houses because the technology says something could be there. I'm sure you wouldn't like it if the police just turned up on your doorstep and asked to search your house.
It's actually quite a funny question, that, isn't it? Because I remember an awful lot of people who were adamant that they'd be absolutely fine. A lot of sort of white men of my kind of vintage saying, I wouldn't mind being stopped and searched several times a day, even though I was completely innocent. And then when during lockdown, police officers started asking people like me whether or not they were actually going about their lawful business, suddenly you had more rattles being thrown out of more middle-aged white prams than I've ever seen before in my life. So, yeah, I can say to you, I wouldn't mind you knocking on my door in uniform, mob-handed, with one of those helpful battering rams in your hand, as long as I was able to prove immediately. And also, how could I prove to you I didn't have it?
Exactly. And it takes a while to search a house for something as small as a mobile phone,
especially if you've hidden it.
Yeah. So I'm sure you wouldn't mind me being there for 2-3 hours searching your house.
Yeah, and of course those are 2 or 3 hours when you and your team could be out doing something else,
exactly.
or something more productive or more likely to actually produce a result. So, I mean, I'm going to let you in on a secret, officer. I thought you might say that. And I've gone back to Congo Chris's article to think maybe we're being a little unfair on him. Maybe he too is possessed of enough intelligence to work out for himself why you and your colleagues are not already doing the thing that he seems to be suggesting. And I thought I'll go back to his article and we can establish whether or not there is a little bit more to it than meets the eye, or whether or not we've slightly misrepresented him. Here you go. The police should always be on the side of the victim and should focus relentlessly on catching more criminals. Every case closed with no prosecution chips away at that. So here's the bit I'd like you to respond to. We need to restore some common sense to policing and ensure that crime has consequences. This plan will help do that. So that's you told.
It's not that easy because it's not the role of the police to dish out consequences. That's what the court's for. Our role is to gather the evidence. And
are you suggesting that Congo Chris Philp has completely forgotten how the criminal justice system is constituted and designed?
Slightly
and
misinformed.
36,800 more crimes a year. Some people listening will be thinking, yeah, all right, so you can't do the ones in blocks of flats or in densely populated areas. And I kid you not on this one, and to be fair, it was the Irish police, not the British police, so it doesn't really matter. But when my daughter's phone disappeared, got half-inched in Dublin and ended up somewhere in Wexford, it did appear to be in quite an isolated rural area. So could you have gone and got that one?
No, because in order in order to actually forcefully go in and search somebody's house, you need some sort of legal authority to do so. If somebody's been arrested, a senior officer can authorise that. If somebody hasn't been arrested, then it'll be up to us to go to the magistrate court to get a warrant to search. So it's not as simple as Congo Chris made out to be.
Well, how dare you call him Congo Chris? It'd be awful if that were to catch on. Thank you, Michael. And you know, I'm making light of a serious subject. I've been a victim of theft and burglary myself, and I know how horrible it is, and I know how frustrating it is when people think it should be easier to recover their stolen goods. But here's something else I know as a consequence of having spoken to police officers, both in the course of my professional duties and my personal life. They are very frustrated by it too, Congo Chris. They possibly are even more frustrated by it than you are. So what the Conservatives are going to do is mandate 3 investigative measures, he says, in order to give the public more confidence to report crimes. There was an Act of Parliament in 2014 under which the Home Secretary lost the ability to issue such instructions without the say-so of the College of Policing. Who wants to guess which party was in power in 2014 when the Home Secretary was stripped of the powers to issue the instructions that the Conservative Shadow Home Secretary, Congo Chris Philp, is pledging to reintroduce? Do you think Congo Chris Philp knows who was in power when the powers that he is pledging to introduce were actually removed? Yeah, you're right. It was the Conservative Party. Dan's in Brockham. Dan, what do you reckon?
I was just catching what Michael just said there. That there's currently no legislation that allows us to enter a property to search for property.
Congo Chris Philp's seen it on Find My iPhone.
I know that
that trumps the law. Come on, mate. Everybody knows that's more important than the law. Habeas corpus, jurisprudence, what some other Latin phrases. I'll just stand on your doorway with Congo Chris holding up your phone, and I'll go, put your trousers on, son, you're nicked.
I wish it was so simple. And I was saying to the person I was told that there's currently, I'm sure there's a piece of legislation going through at the moment that's not enforced yet, but it will allow police officers to have a power of entry,
yes,
where it's been tracked from such devices, like your tags and then the Find My iPhone and all that such. But it has to be authorised by an inspector, and as long as you can guarantee that it's at least in that house that you're going to be going in, then you'll get that authorisation from an inspector. But it's not in power yet, and I don't know who started the bill or who started it, and I have a feeling it was Labour, but I'm not entirely sure.
Right, we definitely know it was the Conservatives who removed the power of the Home Secretary to issue these instructions, probably for perfectly reasonable and pragmatic reasons. And that, I think that Michael really nailed this down. It's going to be almost impossible to be certain that it's behind that door.
Yeah, you run into the issues of you don't know whether someone's just throwing it into their garden and it's just pinging the house in general, and then you knock on the door, and if it's 5 people that live there,
yeah,
you're not arresting all 5 to guarantee to find one phone.
No, and also,
unrealistic.
Yeah, and some people might have just picked up a phone in the street and taken it home, and they're planning on maybe they're going to keep it for themselves, or maybe they're going to hand it in. There's just so much to do. So here it is. Here are the 3 things that the Conservatives robbed the Home Secretary of the ability to do, which the Conservative Shadow Home Secretary says he's going to bring back. Forces would be required to always run a suspect's image through the facial recognition database. You have to follow up the geolocation signals coming from stolen goods, such as a Find My iPhone signal, and then you have to follow up the stolen goods that are seen advertised for sale online. I'm not massively opposed to the final one, although, again, in terms of man hours and likelihood of success, it's probably a little bit unrealistic. But as far as I can tell, Dan, you're a police officer as well, I think.
I was a police officer, yeah.
So Chris Philp, Shadow Home Secretary, is sitting there thinking that you lot have never thought of this.
It's amazing because we follow up on everything else, but we just apparently don't follow up on any of these. And I was sat in my car when you was going, like, why don't police just do this? And I was just sat screaming, going, we've got no power of entry. Like, there's nothing that allows us to get in. And if someone said to me, right, my phone's pinging here, it's going to be in one of these 2 houses, I'll be like, sorry, I've just got no power of entry. I have to go to a magistrate.
Yeah.
And if you imagine it's 2 o'clock in the morning, someone's drunk, they picked up a phone, and they've forgotten they picked it even up until the morning,
I can't do anything to help them. And if that drunk person walks into a station, one of the few stations that are now left in London, and goes, I found this phone, we're like, great. We have no idea who it belongs to.
You just have to leave it. I mean, I suppose no one's going to make your way into an area and pick it. I got a Deliveroo driver, Dan, who had my phone once, and I met him in the McDonald's car park. And in fact, he handed it in to some police officers in Brentford who were part of a local scheme to do more visible policing, and they rang my wife's phone from my phone. It was on that emergency thing where you press the button, I just want to make it clear that they weren't in the McDonald's car park. They were on the other side of the road doing important work. But the delivery driver, but that's luck of the draw, isn't it? They were using the Find My. So anyway, Congo Chris, back to the. I'd say back to school, but he still hasn't swatted up on the geography that he got wrong on question time. So quite where he is on this, I do not know. It's 12:32, and Amelia Cox has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:35 is the time. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. There are, circumstances in which the police might be able to use this technology in order to track down stolen goods. But my goodness me, it's only taken 2 calls from 2 coppers to make it clear why Congo Chris's wizard wheezes, Congo Chris's bright ideas aren't worth the paper they're printed on. Although, given that they're printed in the Daily Telegraph, they probably are worth it. 12:35 is the time. Will's in Camberwell. Will, what made you pick up the phone?
Well, I've got a big problem of forgetting stuff and losing stuff.
You and me both.
Well, misplacing is my preferred word.
Yeah,
and so
I misplace a lot of stuff.
I looked at a credit card.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not, if you say lost, it's almost too defeatist, isn't it? So
it is, yeah.
It's
Temporarily misplaced, yes.
So I've got AirTags everywhere, and I was
like
at work
piercings?
last year. Almost. I mean, so you can get. When I got them, it was 4 for £100.
Okay.
And I only really needed 2. So now it's like, what can I not AirTag?
Yeah.
But in the early days, I put it in my wallet, and I was temporarily out of work. JSA gave me an appointment at 9 o'clock some morning. It's only half an hour away. So I got up at sort of 8:40. I'm going to be late. Phone, wallet, keys. Ran there, did the talk. Walking back, I'm like, phone, wallet, phone, keys. A wallet. Did I bring that, or did I dream it?
Yeah.
So I ran back to the place. Said, sorry, did I leave my wallet here? No sign. And I looked on the AirTag, and it just sort of said 45 Peckham Road. I was like,
you just made that up, right?
No, 100% true story.
No, you made up the address.
No, that was what it said on the thing.
You can't go around giving people burglars' addresses.
Well, the story will...
Whoa, number 23 Acacia Avenue, was it? Oh, okay, yeah, carry on.
So I ran back, because I just run, right? So I just dropped it.
Yeah.
And then I got back there, and now it sort of says 54. And you think, I swear it said 45. Maybe I misremembered it.
Yeah.
I've obviously just
so it's moving.
And
so it's on the move. It's on the Congo. Chris Philp will be on the walkie-talkie immediately.
He would be, yeah, get the SAS in. But I'm just a bit naive, thinking it can't be that short. And I get to 54 or whatever, and now it says 22 Peckham Road. I'm thinking, oh my God, different road. It is moving.
Yeah.
And then I got the old Tracy thing out, and it said no signal. Not like weak signal, no signal. So I'm running down the road, and all of a sudden it says weak signal. And then it's like less weak signal, medium signal, and then it's like this is 12 metres away from you, 10, 8, 7, 4.5, and up on the right was this little chicken shop thing.
Right.
I glanced in, 3 beefy blokes laughing and joking at one side.
Yeah.
Opposite, really slender, late middle-aged lady with like 4 massive Morrison's bags packed with loaves of bread.
All
and
bread,
I think,
just
okay,
bread,
I'll go for
just all bread.
Bread and food.
Oh, other goods as well. Okay, I can't decide. I'll let other people decide. Well, I'm engaged by this story. I was beginning to lose interest, but then you did the countdown, and I got really excited again. But I'm going to let other people decide whether or not you're taking too long to tell it. I'm not going to judge you. All right, carry on, Will.
I'll rush it. We're near the conclusion now. But I'm thinking,
all right, carry on.
Thinking, and I'm new to London. It's only been here 10 years from the countryside, a bit like yourself. But I'm thinking I could get stabbed here, and I realised the phone's getting closer and closer. It's the woman with the food. And I said, "Excuse me, madam. Sorry to be a pain. I think you may have found my wallet. I may have just dropped it." She sort of looked at me like a look of wrath, picked picked up her stuff and said, F you and your... No, I haven't seen your wallet. And then walked down the road and she sort of said, all right, here it is then. Here it is. Oh. And then I took it off her. But she carried on and then quite speedily, but then she stopped, threw the bags down.
Yeah.
She was about 20 metres away. And as I get closer, she's actually crying.
Oh, no.
She's like, I'm really sorry. Yeah, I saw it on the floor and I've not eaten for ages. I was going to steal it and I used the old your debit card to buy all this food. I'm really sorry.
What did you
and
do?
Here's your driving licence. Here's your oyster. Here's all the bits.
She'd taken stuff out of your wallet and so you'd got the wallet and now she's giving you the contents.
Exactly. And we had a little chat. We had a little hug.
Yeah.
And I thought, it's really tough times for people, isn't it?
Well,
And,
blimey. I mean, I like this story. I don't know how relevant it is to the phone-in that I was supposed to be conducting, but I feel better for knowing it. So, you let her keep
bit as well, though.
What? Go on.
No, I got the cash back as well because it had been stolen, so the banks gave it back. But when I got my bike registered and I told this story to a copper, he said you shouldn't have risked you could be imminently stabbed. But they said if you're standing outside an establishment with people in and you're getting a positive thing, call us on 999. We'll be there in about a minute because for the cops, it's like they can solve a crime.
Yeah, if it's an absolute stone cold open and shut case kind of thing, but of course it's not going to be in most cases. So I mean, again, memo to Congo Chris Philp, they already do the stuff that's feasible and plausible. They don't do the stuff that's unfeasible and implausible. And you let her keep all the food. I know you got your money back, but you didn't just have a little look inside and think, well, I'll take those anyway. Just those biscuits.
No. I know it was all brown bread and I like white bread, so
fair enough. I like that story. Yeah, I mean, as I say, I'm not sure how relevant it is to the phone-in that I was supposed to be having, but who's counting? Well, take care, stay safe. 12:41 is the time. I've got the clip of Congo Chris. That sounds like an agreeable. Does anyone want to hear it? Do you know why we call him Congo Chris, or has that already been established? So you think I exaggerate when I introduce things into common parlance? There I was reading the Daily Mirror at the end of last week. Lovely bloke down in Hastings, got a cafe. Having a little bit of a pop at the local councillor who's taken away the vouchers that let hungry children have free school meals. Barry is the man of whom I speak. And I read in the paper, I hope you get your sandwiches wrapped in a road map soon. And I thought to myself, God, I thought I was the only person that said that. And lo and behold, Barry, he'd got it off me. So Congo Chris will catch on. It will stick. But maybe it needs a little bit of a reminder as to why we call Congo Chris Congo Chris.
I come from a neighbouring country called Congo, if you know geographically, that is located right next door to Rwanda. And right now in Goma, there's a genocide going on, and there's such a big conflict going on with people from Rwanda. So had my family members come from Goma on a crossing right now, would they then be sent back to the country that they're supposedly warring, Rwanda? Does that make any sense to you?
No, I think there's an exclusion on people from Rwanda being sent to Rwanda.
They're not from Rwanda, they're from Congo.
They're from Congo.
And they're supposedly
Okay.
warring these people from Rwanda. Are they then going to be sent to Rwanda if they came here on a crossing?
From
Congo? Yeah.
Would people be sent from... Well, I mean, Rwanda is a different country of Congo, isn't it? It's a different country.
Yes.
It is.
Yes, definitely. You're saying if they come from a war zone in Congo, would they then be sent to Rwanda?
12:42 is the time, so that is why Congo Chris is known as Congo Chris. Andy's in Canvey in Essex. Andy, what do you reckon?
Hello, James.
Hello.
Thank you very much. First time caller.
You're very welcome.
Ex-police officer of 19 years, and then I turned private investigator. Your caller told me not to give any names or anything, so I'll only refer to the incident. So I was employed by a boxer, a famous boxer, because his partner had her car broken into.
Oh, yeah.
And basically they wanted to find all the materials that had been stolen out of the car. So I suggested we use the Apple Air tag, which they found, and it come to an address.
Hang on a minute. Why did you tell him not to tell? Everyone wants to know who the boxer is now.
I've been told I'm
No, I
not
know
allowed
you
to
have.
say.
I'm just having a team meeting, mate. I'll be back in a second. Why can't we find out who the boxer... Did he tell you off it? Okay, I'll find out after. Everyone else can just speculate. Carry on, Andy.
Yeah. And the police wouldn't deal with it because of what you've said before with the powers.
Yeah.
But these AirPods were flashing up at this particular property. So I went to the property as a private investigator. I actually went as a Deliveroo driver, which to get the door open. So,
Clever.
you know, obviously I didn't want any aggression at the front door. So I knock on the door. The door's open. It's answered by a man. And I said, yeah, actually, I'm here because there's AirPods flashing up in your house.
Yeah.
We would like them back along with all the belongings from this person. We know that the AirPods are here,
Yeah.
as are the other stuff. And as I'm talking to this person, another man comes down the stairs and points a gun at me.
Whoa.
So I grabbed the
Is that the
first
first
man I'm
time you've had a
talking to.
gun pointed at you?
No, it's not. No, I was
didn't
on
think it
firearms
was.
in,
Yeah, I
in,
can
in
tell.
the army and the police.
I can tell. I think it's like we've got a secret code.
Yeah. So rather than running back, I then jumped forward across the threshold, grabbed the bloke, put him in a neck hold, and whispered in his face that if anyone's going to get shot today, it's going to be him and not me. The police service was called by my opposer that was with me.
Yeah.
And they said, move down the road. I said, I understand, 100 metres, yet move down the road with him. So this bloke that I detained, because obviously I'd had a gun pointed at me, I used him as a shield, moved down the road. About an hour and a half later, when the firearms had finished, incidentally, they did find the firearm that had been shoved in the fence, and the bloke with the firearms had run down the road. Me and my two colleagues got nicked for kidnap.
Oh, really? What, convicted?
No, I pleaded guilty to a Section 3 affray, public order offence.
What should you have done differently then?
I mean, you can't play that, but I had a body camera on as well.
Yeah.
But because of other things in my life, I took that because I didn't want to go to trial for kidnap.
No, fair enough.
Because they see ex-police officers as vigilantes, and that's why they push harder on us. But my point I'm making is, if anybody
don't
does
track
see
it down.
please
Don't track it down.
don't track it down, because you never know. I mean, I'm a professional, and I still had a gun pointed at me, so I did what was necessary.
Yeah.
And now I've got a single conviction of Section 3 affray. But I just want people to be really careful, James.
Well, thank you for that. And I mean, it's a fairly shocking denouement, isn't it? I mean, to a largely quite mischievous phone-in. I wasn't expecting anything that serious to pop up, but I should have done, shouldn't I? Because, of course, you could be dealing with some fairly nasty criminals when you are tracking down your goods to where you think they are. Just a quick word, then, on Chris Philp thinking that your former colleagues and you, when you were still in the force, wouldn't have thought of this.
I personally, as a police officer, if I'd had a report, I mean, before we start investigating, it's always nice to get a statement, but potentially, why can't we go and knock on the door and say, look, we can go out and do investigations, and I don't understand why we don't do that. But again, I understand, you generally you need to get a warrant to go, but people are never going to give you a warrant. And you need to be
sure it's got that you're knocking on the right door. I mean, in the case you described, there's no doubt that it is behind that door. Then I think a lot of the time they probably would do something. Everyone's getting in touch with stories about things they've seen on the telly where you can, in some circumstances, use the technology to your benefit. But the idea that the police are just choosing not to every day, that takes some swallowing. Stay safe, Andy. I mean, that always. I'm glad you didn't tell me who the boxer is, given how the story ended. It's almost like Eleanor knows what she's doing. 12:47 is the time. Speaking of consummate professionals, I think Natasha Clark will be with us after this. I'm hearing reports. I said to Eleanor this morning, I said, what do you mean a press conference? And she said, Farage is doing a press conference. And I said, I bet he isn't. I said, I bet you the questions are very, very carefully. And I made a joke about a certain journalist who works for GBBs. And I said, I bet they only ask him to ask questions. And unless I am being horribly misinformed, then the identity of at least one of the, quotes, journalists, end quotes, who was permitted to ask Nigel Farage a question after months of hiding from journalists, I'm afraid that I would not have put that in my comedy script on the grounds of implausibility. Like, no one's going to believe that he was that pathetic. I think that he actually was.
James O'Brien on LBC.
50. Well, sometimes my inbox surprises me. I think you're sending me things, and like 6, 7, 8, 10, 14, 263 people send me the same thing, and I'm staring at it, and I'm thinking, why are you sending me that? Why is everybody sending me the words Isabel Oakeshott? And I'm thinking, oh, yes, because I said a moment ago that Farage took a question from somebody who is highly unlikely to be asking him anything difficult. So you're all I think she's married to Lee Anderson, isn't she? So you're all sending me the name of Lee Anderson's wife, who also, I think, does a bit of journalism, although she's currently an economic migrant in Dubai. It's so hard to keep up with it. No, it wasn't her. Natasha Clark, LBC's political editor, didn't get a question at the Reform UK quotes press conference, end quotes, where the unelected bureaucrat Zia Yusuf was strutting his funky stuff. But this chap did. This chap, I actually know this chap's name because he got into a bit of bother here once when... So Raheem Kassam got a question.
I know, it's really upsetting for the mainstream media.
And you didn't.
We didn't, I know. Lots of people didn't, were very upset
He
not
used
get
to be
at this press conference.
Farage's consigliere. He was literally on the payroll.
He's a very close advisor of Nigel Farage and does work with him on a regular basis. He's been with him in Clapton for the past few days, according to his own social media.
But he's an American. He works for an American.
He doesn't even go here. He works for something called the National Pulse.
So he's giving questions to foreign media and not to...
It's good to know he has
hard-working
no
British-based... OK, anyway. Yeah. So what was this all about?
Yes, so Reform UK launching their plans today. They say that this is going to stop illegal migration in the Channel by essentially forcing the Royal Navy to...
Yada. What about the stuff in the Sunday Times yesterday?
OK, I'll skip the small talk. That was the reason why they were having the press conference.
He's also been talking utter gibberish about social housing, but he's been told that this is gibberish on the last 74 times that he's made the same claims about social housing going to immigrants, and he's obviously not interested in correcting the record, so we'll move on. Bother doing it again now. So yesterday's report in the Sunday Times questions the fact that he decided to return to politics when he claims he decided to return to politics.
Yes, so there's obviously lots of questions going on about Reform's politics and financial discussions about that £5 million from Christopher Harborne and when it was given to Nigel Farage and under what pretences. Obviously, he has said that he doesn't need to declare that. There were reports in the Sunday Times yesterday that Nigel Farage struck what they call a secret deal to return as the leader of Reform months before the general election, so therefore would undermine their claim that he wasn't thinking about returning to politics at the time that he received this gift from Christopher Harborne. Nigel Farage did respond to these allegations at the press conference a little bit early today.
I had no intention of returning to politics or as leader of Reform, but in the spring of that year, I did talk to Richard Tice about what the liabilities would be if I was to come back to that position. And you'd be a bit of a mug, wouldn't you, to walk into a job and not find out what the potential liabilities were. And they were substantial. In fact, without Richard, the party wouldn't have even survived. So that was useful for me to know, but it wasn't a deal, it wasn't an agreement, it was subject to if I came back. And if you want clarification on this, that came quite some time after the gift, which is perhaps the important point.
So he had absolutely no interest in this job, but he wanted to find out what the
financial liabilities were of Reform UK, allegedly.
Have you ever done that?
What have I said?
Have you absolutely no intention whatsoever of taking a job, but I just want to find out what would happen if I did.
And what the financial agreements might look like for the party.
Okay.
And also just a reminder that it was April of 2024 when Nigel Farage is reported to have got that gift from the Thai-based crypto billionaire Christopher Harborne. He told senior figures in Reform, according to sources in newspapers, that he would need, quotes, $1 million a year to cover lost earnings if he stood for Parliament in the 2024 election. Now, he didn't make his return to frontline politics until June. So people are saying that this is the reason why you did this deal, because you wanted that extra assurance that you were getting the money that you would, quotes, need to go forward before you decided to start for election.
Of course, because he thought, I forget who owns GPBs. Is it Paul Marshall? Or is it one of the others?
Yes, I think you're right.
Paul
yes.
Marshall, who also owns The Spectator now.
Indeed.
So he's paying Farage a ton of money to present a
which he does declare.
But he carries on doing it. So Farage thought he'd have to give up that income stream in order to go back into politics. So he was, according to those reports, saying to them, well, you're going to have to find me £1 million a year from somewhere else. By complete coincidence, up pops Christopher Harborne with £1 million a year for a 5-year period. But Farage actually carried on getting the other income stream from the other billionaire as well. So I hesitate to use words like scam, or in fact I won't, because that would be entirely inappropriate. I'm just asking questions. I wonder if the bloke who was paying him knew that he was going to carry on paying. So he's got it twice now.
Yeah, it's unclear. You know, I think that the whole point is he's not declared this money. He believes that he doesn't. Reform UK have insisted that they've done nothing wrong. They insist that he shouldn't have had to declare this money. But according to to the financial rules, newly elected MPs must register any relevant financial interests and gifts received in the 12 months before their election. So there is obviously an ongoing investigation by the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner. And speaking of, there's a fresh one that has emerged today. Richard Tice, formerly the leader of a Reform Party, is now facing his own separate investigation by the parliamentary authorities as well. I asked Zia Youssef, the shadow...
Unelected bureaucrat.
Unelected bureaucrat, and also the party's Shadow Affairs, Home Affairs spokesperson, what he made of that.
Scrutiny on reform is not only expected, it's healthy, right? We've led the vast majority of opinion polls since the general election, so nobody's concerned, nobody's objecting to scrutiny. But I think that it is vastly disproportionate relative to other parties. And what I'd also say is, clearly parliamentary standards has been weaponized in some ways. And look, I'd offer you some evidence of this. Just a few days ago, some newspapers ran headlines saying Mr. Tice, my friend and colleague Richard Tice, was being investigated by standards for something. And within hours, the very same day, the Commissioner of Standards threw that out.
Welcome back. Idiot Sheila's back. Sorry, I got a bit distracted there by events in the studio. That's so unprofessional of me. Thank goodness I wasn't swearing, It's 12:58 is the time. So, hang on a minute. Well, I can't keep up with that. I mean, it's not... Would it be fair to say he's not the sharpest knife in the drawer, that lad? He gave him a ton of money, right?
I would never say that.
No, but he gave Reform a ton of money, and in return he's got a sort of made-up job.
And also he was the treasurer of the party, of course, before, so he would have seen all of the financial liabilities that, of course, Nigel Farage may or may not have seen before he decided to do a deal that he may or may not have done. Well, as he said in that clip, he did decide to entertain the prospects of a deal before he came back to politics.
And of course, as lots of people are pointing out, it's almost like I did it on purpose. Richard Tice is going out with Isabel Oakeshott, not 30p Lee. Well, Richard Tice, I don't think was ever going out with 30p Lee, but
that would be a story, wouldn't it?
30p Lee is not stepping out with Isabel Oakeshott, the economic migrant based in Dubai. At least she was last time I checked. So we got an economic migrant and an unelected bureaucrat, all in the sort of top tier of Nigel Farage's party.
And sadly, no questions for LBC today.
Right. No, and you didn't get a question, but the bloke that
time.
used to run Breitbart before becoming Nigel Farage's personal advisor and consigliere, he got a question.
Must be doing something that I'm not.
Yeah. Off the top of your head, how many investigations are now underway? From all agencies, whether police, National Crime Agency, Parliamentary Commission, how many?
Are we thinking 4 or 5?
Yeah, well, that's not an answer.
Okay,
that's 4 or 5.
4.
I don't know. I just thought it was worth...
We could top them up if you like.
Just putting it out there, we'll do it tomorrow. That's it from me for today. If you missed any of it, you can listen back. Anyway, you know all this. I know what you're thinking. Oh, thank goodness Sheila's back from holiday.
I made quite an entrance, didn't I, on the quiet? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. If you've heard any little bit of background bleeping, I'm in the middle of a very, very high-fashion photo shoot. And Chris, the photographer, was standing behind the door as Sheila Fogarty bowled through it, and she nearly killed him. Carry on.
I'm so sorry, Chris. It was like a scene from a really bad West End farce, wasn't it? Anyway, I hope you're okay. I didn't know my own strength there for a minute. Thanks, James.
James O'Brien on LBC.